On the night of November 25th to 26, 2022, in the quiet French village of Prahek, 22-year-old Leslie Horrifying and 21-year-old Kevin Trompat went missing. They had come to Prahek for a relaxing getaway with friends. However, the next morning, their belongings were still there, but they were nowhere to be found. What happened that night? Leslie Horrifying grew up in a small town near Prahek, where she created many cherished memories with her family during her childhood. Her mother was always supportive of Leslie's interests and hobbies. After her mother's passing, Leslie found it difficult to cope, but her twin brother provided strong support, helping her maintain her self-confidence. They shared a deep bond and valued even the smallest moments together. Known for her outgoing nature, Leslie had a talent for connecting with others. Her friends and acquaintances recognized her love for animals, especially her dog Onyx, who was more than just a pet. He was her true companion. Leslie often remarked that Onyx understood her emotions better than anyone else. After finishing school, Leslie launched her own house painting business, dedicating herself fully to it. Her company gradually expanded and gained new clients. Leslie felt immense pride in creating something from the ground up. To her, it was more than just a job. It represented her independence and personal success. Kevin Trompat faced difficult challenges growing up. With his father in prison, Kevin had to mature quickly and hide his vulnerabilities, striving to be a strong support for his family. Despite these hardships, he remained kind and enjoyed sharing his passions with friends. One of his favorite activities was exploring nature. He frequently went hiking, took long bike rides, and appreciated the outdoors. Kevin dreamed of making this love for nature a central part of his life. He purchased an old van, started converting it, hoping to travel and possibly work from it in the future. Leslie and Kevin met at a party thrown by their mutual friend, Tom Trullet. They began with light conversation, but it soon became clear that they shared many interests. Leslie discussed her business goals, while Kevin talked about his plans for converting a van. Right from their initial conversation, their connection felt authentic. There were no facades, just two people being their true selves. Their relationship developed rapidly. In just a few weeks, they became close companions, enjoying each other's company, discussing future travels together. Leslie was excited that Kevin shared her passion for animals and encouraged her interests. Kevin, on the other hand, appreciated her honesty and her talent for really listening. In November, Leslie and Kevin planned a short escape from their daily routines. They picked Prahek, a quaint rural town in the Nouvelle-Aquitaine region of western France, which has a population of just over 2,000. It is known for its tranquility and welcoming atmosphere, making it an ideal destination. Their simple plan was to spend one night in Prahek before heading to Bordeaux, a city they had always wanted to visit. They intended for this to be a relaxed getaway for the two of them, reconnecting with friends and enjoying a new environment. That night, Leslie and Kevin stayed with their friends, Tom Trullet and Nicolas Renaud, whose homes were only 30 feet apart. They arrived in Prahek on the evening of November 25th and left some belongings at Tom's house. With their dog Onyx, they then went to Nicholas's house to spend time together. They brought only a few essentials for the night. The atmosphere at Nicholas's home was relaxed, featuring music, drinks, and friendly conversations. Leslie and Kevin seemed at ease as they discussed their future plans, showing no signs of concern. Nicholas welcomed them warmly, and everything appeared to be normal. No one could have predicted that it would be their last night together. Leslie and Kevin only intended to stay briefly at Nicholas's house. Most of their belongings were still at Tom's place, and Onyx, their pet, was with them as usual. Leslie always brought him along. According to Nicholas, the night was like any normal gathering among friends, filled with casual conversations about life and future plans, without any issues. Around 3 a.m., Leslie and Kevin decided to return to Tom's house. Nicholas offered them a place to stay for the night, but they politely declined, preferring to sleep at Tom's where their things were. His house was just 30 feet away, and they felt confident they could get there without any problems. Then, Leslie and Kevin left Nicholas's house with their dog. They headed towards Tom's. That was the last sighting of them. They never arrived at Tom's place. Their clothes and belongings were still at Tom's, which concerned friends and family. By the next morning, it became evident that something was wrong because neither Leslie nor Kevin had contacted anyone, which was unusual for them. Nicholas informed the authorities that the evening had been calm, that they appeared to be fine. When law enforcement searched Tom's house, they found no evidence of a struggle. This marked the start of a complicated search that only grew more challenging over time. Family members were certain that Leslie and Kevin would never just vanish without notice. Leslie frequently communicated with her twin brother, and Kevin always informed his family before leaving. Initially, investigators considered the idea that the couple might have voluntarily left Prague without telling anyone. However, both families dismissed this theory, insisting it was impossible. Additionally, all of their belongings were still at Tom's house, suggesting they had only stepped away briefly with plans to return soon. Law enforcement launched an extensive search in the nearby area, including forests, open fields, all potential roads or paths Leslie and Kevin may have used that night. Local volunteers, residents, neighbors, and friends who were familiar with the area also participated in the search, determined to find any clues that could help locate Leslie and Kevin. They explored abandoned buildings, examined ravines and dirt trails, thoroughly checked every accessible spot. However, despite these efforts, they found no leads or evidence regarding Leslie and Kevin's whereabouts. Officers spoke with neighbors and local residents to see if anyone had heard anything unusual, like screams or strange noises. However, everyone reported that the night had been quiet. There were no witnesses and no physical evidence, leaving Leslie and Kevin's sudden disappearance completely baffling. The families took action, distributed missing persons posters throughout the town and nearby areas. They pursued every lead, searched for any information that might provide a clue. Their relentless efforts drew the attention of local media. The story started to appear in newspapers and on television. As awareness of the disappearance spread in the region, public pressure intensified, leaving law enforcement with no time to waste. Each day, the family's worry grew stronger. They found it hard to believe that their loved ones would just leave without explanation. They struggled to accept the possibility that Leslie and Kevin might not come back. Investigators kept gathering bits of information, minor details, witness statements, and strange rumors, but no clear answers surfaced. At that moment, no one could have foreseen how complicated the case would turn out to be. 12 hours after Leslie and Kevin were last seen, Leslie's phone showed activity in Niort. The police quickly sent a team to investigate the area. They searched nearby neighborhoods, spoke with local residents, and looked into possible routes Leslie and Kevin might have taken. However, no one reported seeing them. There was no sign of them or their belongings. 3 days later, Kevin's phone signaled a location in Fouras, a coastal town more than 50 miles away from their last known location. This raised alarm that the phones might have been moved by someone else. Authorities then began another search in Fouras, interviewing locals and searching the area. But again, they found nothing. After that, both phones stopped functioning, making it even more difficult for the police to track Leslie and Kevin's movements. A significant development in the case occurred on December 8th, when an employee at a waste processing facility contacted the police after discovering personal items in a clothing bin at the Le Relais Association in Puyrevaux. The items included Kevin's travel pass, the clothes and work tools, as well as the makeup bag. Investigators quickly arrived at the scene to collect the evidence for analysis. Both families confirmed that the items were indeed Leslie's and Kevin's. This find dramatically changed the course of the investigation. The initial theory that the couple had left voluntarily was no longer plausible, as it was evident they would not have discarded such personal belongings without a good reason. Investigators now suspected a criminal case. By mid-December 2022, the investigation took a new direction. Police began to focus on Tom Trullet, who had offered them his house and was one of the last people to see them alive. He was questioned several times to clarify the events of that night. Tom initially claimed that he left for a party on the evening of November 25th and did not return until early the next morning. However, geolocation data from his phone revealed that he had stayed in Prague the entire night. This information raised significant concerns for the investigators. Additionally, the police obtained message logs between Tom and Leslie. In a text sent at 2:53 a.m., Leslie mentioned that she wasn't feeling well after taking a substance Tom had given her. This message became crucial evidence, as Tom had never mentioned this incident before. Tom was arrested on February 28, 2023, after authorities suspected he played a significant role in the disappearance of Leslie and Kevin. In March 2023, investigators soon expanded their focus to include Tom's close friends, Nathan Badji, 22, and Enzo Chalat, 23, who were also taken into custody. Both men lived near where Leslie and Kevin's belongings were found, raising suspicions about their knowledge of the situation. During questioning, it became evident that Nathan and Enzo had strong ties to Tom and had been in the vicinity of Prague on the night the couple went missing. Investigators believed that they might have been involved in a coordinated effort, making it less likely that the incident was spontaneous. April 12, 2023, authorities arrested Stephen Mathieu, a fourth suspect and acquaintance of the group. He was arrested at a hotel in Le Havre, where he was a night watchman. He admitted that he had gone to La Rochelle to support his friend Nathan Badji and had met Tom Trullet on the sidelines of a techno party. The following day, he and Nathan Badji are said to have gone to a bricolage store to buy 2 bags of quicklime, a shovel, and rat poison. Phone records showed that the 2 men were in Prague when they apparently returned to Tom Trullet's house, where the pair were killed. According to Tom Trullet and Michael Zadi, this was to clean up the crime scene. That same day, Michael Zadi was arrested and detained. He is being investigated for assassination. The 3 previous suspects had been friends with Tom and were also familiar with Leslie and Kevin. This led to the theory that the crime was planned and possibly committed by a group rather than just one person. During questioning, Tom revealed that he once had feelings for Leslie. He said he had always liked her, but she only viewed him as a friend. When Leslie began dating Kevin, Tom felt rejected and humiliated. Investigators believed this emotional turmoil could have motivated the crime, suggesting it stemmed from a personal grudge that turned into a desire for revenge. Additionally, financial factors may have played a role. A close friend of Kevin's family told police that Kevin had €10,000 in cash, which he intended to use to buy a car. Tom knew about this money, and investigators thought it might have influenced his actions. During questioning, Tom alleged that Kevin was involved in selling illegal and owed him a lot of money. Kevin's family strongly denied these claims, asserting that Tom was trying to damage Kevin's reputation and deflect blame. With each round of questioning, the case became more complicated. Law enforcement was convinced that Leslie and Kevin's disappearance was not accidental. The evidence increasingly indicated a planned abduction, with each individual having a specific role in the events. After the arrests, thorough interrogations allowed authorities to piece together the events of that night. They discovered how Leslie and Kevin were taken and what transpired in the hours that followed. Tom Trullet was a key figure in the incident. He coordinated the group's actions and initiated the attack. Leslie and Kevin returned to Tom's house after visiting Nicholas. Although Tom was supposed to be at a party, he was actually at home. Later, a vehicle arrived at Tom's house with Nathan, Enzo, Stephen, and Stephen inside. They were all part of the plan and knew their roles. When Tom gave the signal, the rest of the group entered the house. They were equipped with hammers, metal rods, knives, even a sword. They barged in, while Leslie and Kevin were unsuspecting. Kevin was the first victim of the attack. Nathan and Tom hit him several times with hammers and metal tools. Leslie attempted to defend herself, but Tom quickly subdued her. Both were restrained and forced into a vehicle, along with their dog, Onyx. The vehicle was taken to a remote area where Tom and his accomplices continued to assault Kevin. He suffered severe injuries from blunt object. According to the police, he died from both internal and external trauma. Leslie was kept separate from Kevin. Eventually, Tom killed her with a sword. Their bodies were discarded in different locations. Following the instructions of Tom Trullier, on March 3, 2023, Kevin Trompet's body was discovered in a forest in Puy-Ravoux, while Leslie Hurlbeck's body was found on March 4th in a forest in the commune of Verson. Both burial sites were in secluded, difficult-to-reach areas, which investigators recognized as an attempt to hide evidence. The whereabouts of Onyx are uncertain. The suspects claimed they released the dog on a nearby road, but police had doubts about this. In January 2023, the remains of a dog matching Onyx's description were discovered near Prague, but due to decomposition, it could not be definitively identified. Leslie's family believed that Onyx died alongside her. Medical examiners arrived at the scene shortly after the bodies were found. Their job was to determine the cause of death and the circumstances surrounding it. During the examination, they noted that both bodies were significantly decomposed, but there were clear signs of violent behavior. Experts observed several broken bones and numerous bruises. They believed these injuries were likely inflicted by heavy metal objects, such as rods, baseball bats, or metal hammers. The autopsy also revealed deep cuts that suggested the use of a large knife or machete. This evidence confirmed that Leslie and Kevin suffered a brutal attack and were killed in a particularly cruel manner. The medical examiners concluded that both victims died from excessive blood loss, resulting from a combination of internal bleeding and external wounds. Based on the timeline, experts estimated that they were killed on the night they disappeared. After the attack and killings, Tom and his associates took measures to eliminate any evidence. Tom returned to his home to destroy anything that could link him to the crime, while the rest of the group was responsible for getting rid of the couple's belongings. This is how their items ended up in Puy-Ravoux. The police based their investigation on several important points, including Tom's personal grudge against Leslie and a supposed argument with Kevin regarding a debt. The money Kevin had on him also seemed to play a role. Tom reportedly told investigators that the money was shared among the group. As new witness testimonies came in, conflicting statements arose. Some witnesses stated that everyone participated in attacking Kevin, while others insisted that only Tom and Nathan were involved. This inconsistency made the investigation more difficult. Medical reports indicated markings typical of being restrained. Scrapes on their wrists and forearms suggested that Leslie and Kevin may have been tied up or held against their will before they were killed. For the victims' families, these findings confirmed their deepest fears. For law enforcement, however, it provided important evidence of premeditated murder and the brutal treatment of the victims. Medical examiners carefully gathered all evidence to ensure there would be no doubt in court about who was guilty of the crime. Kevin's funeral was held on March 16th in Niort. It was attended not only by close family and friends, but also by neighbors, acquaintances, even strangers who had heard about the tragedy in the news. 2 days later, on March 18th, Leslie's memorial took place in La Rochelle. Both events drew many people wanting to support the families to honor the memories of Leslie and Kevin. Flowers were placed, candles were lit, words of sympathy were exchanged. At Kevin's funeral, his father, Guy Trompet, publicly blamed the 5 suspects for ruining 2 families, causing immense suffering to them. His heartfelt remarks struck a chord with those in attendance. Many people shared his grief and offered their condolences. Following the service, Guy organized a march to honor both his son and Leslie. The procession moved through the streets of Deux-Sèvres and nearby towns. In his speech, Guy expressed how losing a son creates a permanent wound, demanded that those responsible be brought to justice. Soon after, Guy found himself at the center of controversy. He was accused of attempting to hire someone to take revenge on the suspects for Kevin and Leslie's deaths. Investigators claimed Guy had spoken with a woman about the possibility of paying $110,000 to eliminate the suspects. However, he strongly denied these allegations, asserting that any such discussions may have taken place without his knowledge and that he was not involved in any malicious plans. Kevin's father, Guy Trompat, was sentenced on June 2, 2023 by the New York court to 18 months in prison, 6 of which were suspended, along with a 5-year ban on possessing weapons and the revocation of his hunting license for threatening to kill. A €100,000 bounty was allegedly promised to anyone who killed the suspects or their relatives. However, he was acquitted of inciting murder without supervision. Marie-Thérèse Garcia, the aunt of Leslie Hurlbeck, was indicted on May 25th on charges of kidnapping and confinement in an organized gang, murder, and possession of weapons, and was subsequently remanded in custody. She is accused of threatening individuals involved in the disappearance of Leslie and Kevin. Investigators from the Versailles Crime Squad have linked this case to that of Corinne, whose body was found decapitated and dismembered in an iron chest. Marie-Thérèse Garcia was identified as a potential suspect in that murder, which took place in the 1980s. She was arrested for the crime in 2007 following accusations from her daughter, arrested and charged 2 months later. Marie-Thérèse Garcia is currently in pretrial detention and maintains her innocence. She was re-interrogated by the investigating judge on August 11th. Tom Trouillet and his associates, Nathan Baji, Enzo Chala, Steven Mathieu, Mikkel Zadi, were in custody while waiting for their trial. For the families of Leslie and Kevin, these court proceedings offered a chance to seek answers and achieve justice. During this time, the families focused on keeping Leslie and Kevin's memories alive by sharing stories about Leslie's ambitions for her business and Kevin's goal of completing his van renovation. Ahead lay the most crucial phase, the trial. Both families and the public anticipated this event as the pivotal moment that could bring closure to their story. In early 2025, the 5 accused, Tom, Nathan, Enzo, Steven, and Michael, faced court. They were charged with kidnapping, homicide, and hiding the bodies. Each remained in custody, awaiting the final verdict. The trial is ongoing, complicated by the defendants' partial denials of guilt and conflicting testimonies, making the court's work difficult. In France, aggravated homicide, especially when involving kidnapping and body concealment, carries a maximum penalty of life imprisonment. Under French law, life imprisonment means the convicted person may apply for parole no sooner than 30 years. At the time of the trial, prosecutors were demanding the maximum sentences, life imprisonment for all 5, emphasizing the severity of their crimes. The court will issue a final ruling after thoroughly reviewing all evidence, witness statements, and expert reports. Meanwhile, Leslie and Kevin's families continue to wait for the verdict. The trial's outcome remains unconfirmed as of March 2025, with proceedings ongoing. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Douglas. Sarah Douglas was born in 1987 in Sacramento, California, into a family of 5 siblings. They always get along and help each other. From an early age, her parents commented that she was a girl with a gentle and cheerful personality. However, during her teenage years, her personality changed significantly. She started associating with a group of troubled teens and to spend all her free time with them. As a result, she quickly dropped out of school. At the age of 19, Sarah started dating a boyfriend named Nicholas. In 2007, when she was 20, she became pregnant. By this time, her relationship with Nicholas was deteriorating, and they often fought over minor issues. The arrival of their child only increased the conflict between them, causing them to decide to separate. Nicholas moved to Santa Rosa, a city 150 kilometers away, where he began a new life with another woman. Despite being separated, he still cares for their son, and the two share custody. Sarah found herself in a challenging situation. As a young single mother, with a young child to care for, and education level is not high, she had difficulty making ends meet. Her parents were busy raising their own younger children and couldn't offer her much support. Although her mother and sister helped whenever they could, it still wasn't enough financially. She needed to find a way to earn money. Eventually, Sarah decided to work as an escort, drawn in by the good pay and flexible hours. She has an attractive appearance and quickly became famous in this industry, helping her earn a good income. However, she did not know much about the risks involved in this profession. After a few years as a call girl, she met Orville Fleming, a man who gave her the stability and security she had always craved. She hopes to quit her current job, find a husband, as well as a father for her son, and finally get her life on track. She believes so blindly in her dream that she does not notice the dangers around her. Orville Fleming was born in 1958 in California. Before he met Sarah, he was a happy husband and father. He dedicated over 30 years to his career as a fire chief, earning the respect of his community. He served for 24 years, including 3 years in Modesto. In 1993, he became a fire engineer with the California Department of Forestry. Thanks to his excellent performance, he was promoted to captain and became a battalion chief in 2012. Throughout his career, Orville built an impressive resume and reputation. He also worked part-time as an instructor at a fire academy, where he shared his valuable experience and trained future firefighters. Through hard work, he earned about $130,000 a year, enough to enjoy a wealthy lifestyle. When his children were grown, he and his wife could enjoy a comfortable life and their own pleasures. However, beneath the facade of this seemingly happy family lay a troubling secret about Orville. He spent most of his money on encounters with young escorts, as he found family life dull and craved excitement with attractive young women. He met these women through dating sites and escort services, and that led him to Sarah, a 20-year-old girl, 30 years younger than him. In his intimate relationships with these young girls, he sought the variety that was missing from his long-term marriage. His wife is a discreet woman, so he often turns to call girls to satisfy his private needs. After meeting the beautiful Sarah online, Orville began dating her regularly. She charges $300 an hour for each meeting. He became very fond of her, and their encounters began to occur more frequently. She opened up to him about her struggles, earning Orville's sympathy, which gradually evolved into love. He loved Sarah so much that he decided to divorce his wife to start a new life with her, and she agreed. Orville decided to take action immediately. He soon had a conversation with his wife, leading him to leave her and their 2 children to be with his mistress, Sarah. He purchased a house in a quiet suburb near Sacramento. Sarah joyfully shared the news with her family, believing that her life would improve and that she could finally create a stable family. She promised Orville that she would quit the escort service and never return to that line of work. Everything seemed to be going well. However, Sarah's family was concerned about the age difference between her and her boyfriend. She was only 24 years old, while her boyfriend, Orville, was 54 years old enough to be her father. However, he seemed to be a thoughtful family man, which helped ease their worries. They saw this as a happy time in Sarah's life and supported her, not wanting to affect her happiness. At the start of their life together, everything seemed perfect and joyful. Orville tries to arrange the house so that Sarah and her son feel as comfortable as possible. She gave up her job as a call girl and started a normal life, becoming a housewife. Their life felt like a fairy tale, a perfect home, and a loving relationship. Sarah wishes to have a closer relationship, and she also wants to marry Orville. Her dreams seem to come true when Orville presented her with an expensive engagement ring. adorned with a large diamond. She accepted his proposal, but her happiness was short-lived. Orville turned out to be very jealous and controlling. He was possessive and wanted to monitor her every move, making her report on everything she did. He realized that she was financially dependent on him, and he used that to control her life, making her completely attached to him. The relationship lasted several years until Sarah grew impatient. Orville exhibits obsessive behavior and wants to control the people she interacts with, even in public. This led to suspicions and arguments between them. Additionally, conflicts arose with Orville's wife, Megan, who was still legally married to him. He filed for divorce, but the process took a long time, giving her more time to pressure him over financial matters. By early 2014, the situation had become very tense. Megan frequently calls Orville to ask him to pay off his debt and give her more money. She was particularly upset about the large sums he spent on call girl service, which often left Sarah in tears. At this point, Sarah and Orville's relationship had significantly deteriorated. She began spending more time with her mother and sister, and during one conversation, she admitted that she wanted to end the relationship due to the mounting problems. Sarah realized that continuing the relationship was a mistake. However, she did not think that her decision to leave him could lead to serious consequences. On Wednesday, April 30, 2014, Sarah's day started like any other. She sent her son to visit his biological father for a few days and planned a vacation with her mother and sister. They first went to a casino where they enjoyed themselves until 11 p.m. During that time, Orville kept calling and texting her, but she chose not to respond. He was upset that she ignored his request not to have fun while he was away. As midnight approached, Stephanie, Sarah's sister, took her back to the house she shared with Orville, and they said their goodbyes. Once inside the house, Sarah immediately noticed a strong smell of gas. She went to the kitchen and saw that the gas burners left on. Alarmed, she called her sister Stephanie to let her know that Orville had neglected to turn off the gas. It was obvious he wanted to poison her. Suddenly, a scream was heard, startling she. Orville had unexpectedly shown up, disrupt her and Stephanie's phone call. Then, all Stephanie could hear was her terrified screams. Assuming it was just another argument between lovers, Stephanie decided to hang up and go to bed. Early in the morning, Stephanie decided to call Sarah to find out what had happened the previous night. She dialed Sarah's number, but was surprised when there was no answer, as Sarah usually stayed in touch. As anxiety grew over Sarah's lack of response, she and her aunt went to Sarah's house around 8 a.m. to check. They rang the doorbell and knocked for a long time, but no one answered. Just as they were about to leave, her aunt tried the door handle, and to their surprise, the door opened. This was unusual behavior, which made them even more worried, but they decided to go inside. Once inside, they found the living room in disarray, with furniture out of place and items scattered everywhere. They cautiously made their way to the bedroom, hoping to find Sarah. At that moment, a neighbor heard them screaming from the window. He saw them running out of Sarah's house, clearly terrified. When he asked what was wrong, they told him there was a human body inside the house. The neighbor immediately called 911 to report the situation. By 9 a.m., officers were on the scene. Several officers worked together to calm and interview the witness. In the bedroom, the officers discovered clear evidence of a struggle. A young woman lay face down on the floor, showing no signs of life. She had injuries on her body and neck, including cuts and a sheet tied around her throat. Blood was splattered on the bed and walls. In the bathroom, they found a bloody towel thrown into the washing machine. All the windows were tightly closed. They quickly secured the crime scene and started their investigation. Forensic experts arrived to gather evidence, and the body was taken to the morgue for an autopsy to determine the cause of death. The witnesses identified Sarah Douglas, who was 26 years old when she died. The autopsy revealed that she suffered at least 14 stab and cut wounds, likely inflicted with a kitchen knife. There were also signs of suffocation on her neck, which was determined to be the cause of death. Forensic experts discovered multiple bruises and evidence of beatings on her body, indicating she had fought back fiercely. Blood tests showed that at the time of her death, she was neither drunk nor under the influence of drugs. Sarah's aunt and sister informed detectives that she had previously worked as a call girl, but quit after meeting Orville. Despite their age difference, she believed he was a good man who could help her build a better life. However, their relationship had become strained in recent months, and she had decided to end things with him. Additionally, Sarah's sister Stephanie informed detectives about everything she heard on her cell phone the night before. It was likely that Orville attacked Sarah and killed her out of jealousy. As a result, he became the primary suspect in the brutal murder, and a warrant was issued for his arrest. Despite their best efforts to search for him, they still couldn't find him. He was not at home, at work, with his ex-wife Megan, or with his relatives. He had gone into hiding, prompting the police to place him on a statewide wanted list. Just a day after the search began, Orville's official car was found abandoned near a house, but there was no sign of him being there, nor any clues as to where he might have gone. Police have gathered detailed information about Orville and issued a wanted poster stating that he is a particularly dangerous criminal. The database indicated that he owned 2 pistols, but they were not found in his car or at the murder scene. It is believed he was carrying them and may resist arrest. Citizens were alerted to stay vigilant and report any suspicious individuals, while also being advised to exercise caution and avoid confrontations with Orville, who may be armed and very dangerous. The search operation lasted over 2 days. During this time, family and friends gathered near Sarah's home, closely following the search and hoping for any news. They came to honor her memory as a victim of domestic violence. The media also took a keen interest in the case, tracking the police investigation closely. Orville's colleagues were equally shocked by the incident. They knew him as a kind, positive person and a professional with a stellar reputation who had consistently demonstrated his integrity on the job. However, it is worrying that he disappears soon after the death of his young lover Sarah, raising suspicions about his involvement. 5 days later, Orville was fired from his position as head of the fire department because he failed to report to work without any explanation. Given the circumstances, this was merely a bureaucratic formality. Meanwhile, the search is being extended to areas where he may be hiding. He is experienced in outdoor activities and regularly participates in challenging hikes. His endurance and survival skills are evident in extreme conditions. He is known for training in remote wilderness areas for long periods of time that few people know about. Even though there is a lot of information surrounding the case, the situation seems to be becoming more tense. Orville's wife, Megan, decided to make the situation more serious. She claimed that he and other members of the California Fire Brigade often invited escorts to the fire station for entertainment. Megan said she had seen videos showing these women arriving at the fire station and having fun inside the fire trucks. She also mentioned that a woman named Sarah had been present on a couple of occasions. The police received information regarding the situation and visited the fire station to speak with the employees and verify the details. However, they were unable to locate any video recordings or photographs that Megan had mentioned. Megan could not provide this evidence either, leaving the rumors unconfirmed. In addition, Megan also said that during the time Orville was having an affair with Sarah, he had run up a large debt due to his addiction to prostitutes. She asked him to pay the debt, but he never did. She also mentioned a diamond engagement ring that she suspected was fake. She also convinced the police that Sarah Orville's mistress, had been stalking her, alleging that Sarah frequently called and threatened her. As a result, she sought a restraining order against Sarah, but this claim could not be substantiated as there was no evidence of harassment. It appeared that she may have fabricated these accusations to further tarnish Sarah's reputation in the eyes of the public. After 2 weeks of thorough investigation, the court denied Megan's request for divorce. On May 26, 2014, Orville was finally captured at a bus stop near where his official car was found. He had been hiding in the forest, but was spotted when he ventured out to buy food, despite having shaved his mustache and attempted to disguise himself. He was taken into custody without issue. He did not have a gun and surrendered to police. After his arrest, he needed special supervision. On May 20, 2014, Orville appeared in court. He claimed he could not afford a lawyer, but maintained his innocence. 10 days after the initial hearing, the city's road patrol began a new investigation into illegal activities involving members of the fire department where Orville worked. By October 2014, after the hearing had officially lasted more than a month, Orville formally pleaded not guilty. Sarah's family was shocked by Orville's arrogance, especially when he winked at the public defender. The prosecution detailed the troubled relationship between Sarah and he. He is portrayed as a jealous man who wants complete control over Sarah's life. He prohibited her from working, took away her personal bank account and mobile phone, and restricted her from using her own vehicle. Meanwhile, an investigation is underway into misconduct at the fire department where Orville worked. On December 29, 2014, the investigation confirmed that there was inappropriate sexual behavior between firefighters after hours. Although the video recordings mentioned by Megan were never located, but the investigation led to 16 firefighters being placed on administrative leave. In June 2015, the Orville trial entered its final stages. The defense presented defendant Orville in a favorable light, arguing that he was a victim influenced by Sarah, a prostitute with drug and alcohol problems. They argued that he was exploited and pointed out that he did not recall the argument with Sarah. This strategy was intended to help reduce the charges against him. As part of this strategy, the defense also sought to discredit Sarah. On the night of the incident, a violent argument erupted, which was overheard by her older sister, Stephanie. However, Orville described experiencing a dissociative state, likening it to being a zombie, as he went to the kitchen to get a knife. He then returned to the bedroom and stabbed Sarah multiple times. Next, he began strangling her until she showed no signs of life. He maintained that he could not remember the details, stating that the incident played out in his mind like disjointed fragments. Orville attempted to sway the jury by expressing deep remorse for his actions. The prosecution aimed to demonstrate that he was not telling the truth. They presented recorded interrogations where his statements contradicted his testimony during the trial. This discrepancy damaged his credibility and led the court to pursue a first-degree murder charge. On June 24, 2015, just 2 days after the debate ended and just before his birthday, Orville Fleming was charged with second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Sarah's death had a devastating impact, not only on her, but also on those around her. A few months later, her brother Leroy, who was very close to her, died, unable to cope with the grief of losing his younger sister. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the disturbing case of Ryan Wingarden. In the shadow of seemingly peaceful family relationships, sometimes lurk horrifying secrets. The case of Ryan Wingarden and his sister Gail is a terrifying example of human depravity. At the same time, the terrible consequences of greed and the desire to protect shameful secrets, a blood relationship turned into a nightmare. This devastating event shook an entire community and left an indelible mark. Ryan's case revolves around jealousy, a person willing to kill to keep their secrets hidden. The story takes place in Holland, Michigan, a small town known for its rich Dutch heritage and culture. The town's charm and beautiful scenery create a pleasant atmosphere. Newlyweds Gail and Rick Brink lived in a northern town that seemed perfect for they to build their future together. They were excited to begin renovating their new home. Sadly, jealousy and hidden secrets shattered that happiness. Now, let's talk about Pam, Ryan's wife. She kept a devastating secret for 25 years to protect her family, career, and reputation. The burden of hiding this truth became unbearable, and on January 18, 2013, it all came to light in front of detectives. Pam revealed the long-held secret that had haunted her out of love and fear. She allowed her husband to dominate her life. Ryan controlled whom she could talk to and even threatened her life. For 25 years, she lived in torment with the knowledge of how Gail and Rick were murdered back in time. When Gail was 19 and Rick was 22, they met at work in 1984. Rick was so taken by her that he told his mother he had found the one he wanted to marry. Gail came from a large family with 8 children and was not financially well off, but she was ambitious, determined, and knew her goals. When she met Rick, she felt it was destiny, and they formed a strong couple. They knew they needed to work together to build the life they dreamed of. Soon, Gail decided to move in with Rick, and on April 25, 1986, they got married. Just one day after Gail turned 21, they planned to purchase a house together. After their honeymoon, they returned to Michigan and began searching for a ranch-style home with 20 acres of land on the outskirts of town. This type of property was perfect for the newlyweds, who wanted to start their life together. Rick successfully negotiated with the bank and managed to buy the property at a good price. But the house required extensive repairs. Fortunately, Rick had previously trained as a carpenter's apprentice, and his skills are very useful for renovation. Gail and Rick moved into their new house in 1987 and started making repairs. On November 21, they attended the wedding of one of Rick's school friends. Enjoying time with friends, this would be the last day anyone saw them alive. By November 23, 1987, neither Rick nor Gail showed up for work, which was highly unusual as they were both dedicated employees who never missed a day. Concerned, Rick's parents were alerted by their employer about Rick and Gail's absence. Immediately, they went to Rick's home on Ransom Street. When they arrived, they found Rick's SUV still parked in the driveway. But what they discovered next left them shocked and horrified. Rick was found in the front seat with attacked by force to his head. His parents quickly called the police. The Ottawa County Sheriff's Department arrived and secured the area. Upon searching the home, they discovered Gail dead on the marital bed, her face obscured by a bloody pillow. When the pillow was taken away, police discovered that Gail had been assaulted 3 times. Both Rick and Gail had been brutally murdered. When they had only been married for 18 months, the inspection of the crime scene revealed that nothing in the home had been disturbed. This created a mystery that baffled the officers. Initially, police suspected Rick may have murdered Gail and then harmed self-harm in the car outside. However, this theory was quickly dismissed after the bodies were moved and examined. As no gun was found in the house or nearby, they then considered the possibility of a robbery. But further examination showed that all belongings were in their original places, all the money was accounted for, and there were no signs of forced entry, struggle, or any damage. Both Gail and Rick were still wearing their jewelry, and the entire house was clean, with hardly any evidence found. Here, they found no weapon at the scene. Also, could not locate the bullet casings during the search. The police found fingerprints. 4 belonged to Gail and Rick. While 2 were from an unknown source, 1 fingerprint was found on the toilet seat and the other on the phone. The police checked these prints against their database, but found no matches, lacking physical evidence. They shifted their focus to gathering information about the victim's lifestyle and habits by interviewing friends and family. Ryan described Gail and Rick as the sweetest couple he had ever known, stating he had never seen a husband and wife get along so well. Rick's brother, Batbrink, called the funeral an incredibly sad occasion. Gail's family, particularly her sister Cheryl and Ryan, were especially grief-stricken. After the mourning period ended, the police resumed their investigation, exploring different leads, but still lacked any evidence. Multiple theories emerged, but all the leads proved fruitless and unverified. A month later, on December 24, 1987, another shocking crime occurred. Deborah and her husband were found dead in their backyard, both with their throats slit. This case bore similarities to the previous murder of Gail and Rick. Nothing was stolen. There were no signs of a break-in, and no clear motives could be identified. The remarkable point is that the 2 families lived only half a mile apart, raising concerns among the public and investigators. However, this connection was dismissed when differences between the 2 cases were identified. The murders of Rick and Gail appear to have been carried out in a premeditated manner, suggesting a planned murder. Another theory caught the attention of investigators. Gail was looking into financial irregularities at her workplace, and the dossier she took home went missing. However, this theory was eventually set aside as the police ran out of leads, and the case went cold. Despite this, the murders of Rick and Gail remained in the public's memory. In 2007, 20 years after the murders, a group of investigators established a cold case unit in the Tawa County Sheriff's Department. This unit was led by detectives Venus Repper and David Blakely. In there, the Brink murder was one of the cases they chose to investigate. Although the documents were old, they managed to recover important notes. Venus and David noticed some remarkable details. During their discussions with friends and family, they frequently heard the name of Ryan. Unlike other family members, Ryan often made bizarre comments during family gatherings. Relatives recalled that he exhibited odd behavior. For example, he once claimed to have a vivid mental image of Gail's murder, stating he could see someone walking down the hallway to her bedroom. Cheryl remembered him saying, "Sometimes I wonder if I could have done something like that." Additionally, Ryan confessed to his sister Lynn that he felt a need to apologize to Gail because he believed he had violated her. During the previous investigation, police had ruled Ryan out as a suspect due to an alibi provided by his then-girlfriend, Pam. She claimed that on the night of the murder, she was doing laundry with Ryan, and her account matched his, making his story credible. And then, it was later revealed that Pam and Ryan had actually gone to a friend's house that night to use the washing machine. Upon reviewing the reports, detectives found inconsistencies in Pam's testimony. Although Pam's testimony strongly supported Ryan's alibi, the polygraph test revealed a different story. When asked if she was with Ryan that night, Pam said no, and the polygraph indicated no deception in her response. This raised concerns, so detectives decided to investigate further by visiting Pam in the trailer park where she lived with Ryan and their children. At that time, Pam and Ryan had been married for 23 years and had 3 children together. Pam had first met Ryan in 1987 when she was a single mother with a 6-month-old baby. They married in 1990 and remained together since then. The detectives arrived at the trailer park and were greeted by Ryan. Since marrying Pam, Ryan had become a devoted husband and was actively involved in raising their children. He informed the investigators that Pam was not home, and they asked him about his account of the double murder that occurred that night. Ryan's recollection of events was quite vague. After the brief investigation, the detectives arranged to meet with Pam at the department later, but Ryan insisted on being present for the conversation. They informed him that this was not possible, as they needed to question Pam alone. Pam's account was consistent with the alibi she and Ryan had previously provided. Despite this, Detectives Venus and David sensed that something was off. They were determined to investigate further, delve into Gail's and Rick's past. As they looked into Pam and Ryan's relationship, they discovered that Ryan had not always been faithful to Pam while dating her. He had also been involved with another woman, Crystal Beelan, with whom he had an unstable relationship for 4 years. She ended things with Ryan when she realized he was becoming serious with Pam. But their friendship continued. Detectives located Crystal and invited her to the department, where she agreed to come in voluntarily. The interrogation proceeded smoothly, and no incriminating evidence emerged during the conversation. However, she disclosed a significant secret that changed the direction of the case. She revealed that Ryan had previously confessed to her about an incestuous relationship he had with Gail when they were younger, a few days after the murder. Ryan had asked Crystal to drive past the crime scene, but she found it inconvenient, so they went to a nearby park instead. While at the park, Ryan expressed a need to talk and said he wanted to share a heavy secret with her. He then recounted the sexual relationship he had with Gail, claiming that it was consensual. However, he mentioned that, in his last request to Gail in the backyard, she rejected him, but he still proceeded with his intentions and forced himself on Gail. Ryan showed Crystal pictures of Gail in a bikini, expressing how he couldn't take his eyes off Gail and that he was deeply attracted to her. It seemed he was the only one aware of his feelings. One day, Rick caught Ryan staring at Gail, leading to some suspicion on Rick's part. Although he didn't confront Ryan about it, Crystal's revelation about Ryan's feelings gave the detectives a new perspective on the case, but her information wasn't sufficient, prompting the need for more investigation. To gather more details, they needed to speak with Pam. When Ryan and Pam arrived at the office, it was challenging to persuade Ryan to allow the detectives to speak with Pam privately. Eventually, he relented, and the questioning of Pam began. In Pam's testimony, she revealed that she was deeply in love with Ryan, particularly because Ryan was encouraging her and her child to move in with him. However, the situation quickly took a turn for the worse. That evening, Ryan took Pam to Gail's house, he parking in a way that would keep them hidden. He then led Pam to Rick's car. When Pam looked inside, she saw Rick's body on the front seat. Ryan didn't allow her to linger. He grabbed her wrist and pulled her into the house, leading her down the hallway. In the master bedroom, they have seen Gail's lifeless body, which appeared to be peacefully sleeping. Ryan picked up a pillow and placed it over Gail's face, saying, "Isn't she beautiful?" He then turned to Pam with a threatening look and warned, "If you go to the police or tell anyone what I did, this could happen to you too." Terrified, Pam fled from the house, despite the horror she had just witnessed. That night, she stayed with Ryan at his house. The next morning, they continued their lives as if nothing had happened. When Pam insisted on knowing why Ryan killed Rick and Gail, he finally confessed that he had a sexual relationship with Gail when they were younger. He was afraid that Rick might have found out about it. Over time, Ryan also revealed that he envied the success of Gail and Rick because he felt unsuccessful in his own life. He made money by selling small amounts of illegal substances. And after marrying Pam, she became the main provider for the family. While he stayed home to raise their children, Ryan was jealous of Gail's life and her husband, their new home. With her career, he was consumed by jealousy and resentment. Watching Gail be happy with someone else, Ryan was quickly arrested after Pam's confession, however. He maintained that he did not kill the family. He only admitted to having had a sexual relationship with his sister Gail before her marriage. The family had mixed feelings after the investigation concluded, but they were relieved that the case was closed and Ryan was in custody. The police searched Ryan's home, but did not find the murder weapon or clothing, which was expected given the time that had passed since the crime. The fingerprints from the crime scene did not match Ryan's, but the motive for the murders was compelling. As a result, Ryan was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. His trial began in March 2014 in Ottawa County Court. The prosecution argued that Ryan was driven by jealousy and feared that Gail would reveal their incestuous relationship. 60 witnesses testified against him, but it was Pam's testimony that ultimately determined Ryan's fate. In Pam's testimony in court, Ryan reacted by hurling insults at her, leading the court to reprimand him and have him removed from the courtroom. Pam recounted her troubled marriage to Ryan and described the night he took her to see the bodies of the victims. Additionally, Ryan's cellmate testified that Ryan bragged in prison about his murders and expressed a desire to kill his other sister, Cheryl. Because she was assisting in the investigation, Ryan also defended himself, but his statements were erratic and confusing. He claimed that the authorities were conspiring against him, suggesting they needed to close the case. He alleged that the police had coerced Pam into giving false testimony. On March 28, 2014, the jury reached a verdict. Ryan Weingarten was found guilty of both murder charges. During his sentencing, Ryan shouted and made threats when asked to calm down. Ryan Weingarten was ultimately sentenced to 2 life terms in prison without the possibility of parole after the trial. Cheryl expressed her feelings, stating that although she had loved her brother all her life, she now despised the person he had become. Ryan's mother never accepted the verdict and passed away in 2021 at the age of 90. Pam later divorced Ryan. He has lost all his appeals and remains imprisoned to this day, although it took more than 2 decades. The truth has finally come to light thanks to the efforts of investigators and the cooperation of those who dare to speak out. This is not only a story of paying for crime, but also a reminder that justice, however slow, can still be served when those involved continue to seek the truth. The case of Ryan Weingarten highlights the consequences of crime and also exposes the darkest corners of family relationships. Ryan's moral degradation: he killed his sister and her husband to hide his secrets, with his actions stemming from selfishness, jealousy, and sick motives. He turned his family, which should have been the safest place. Weingarten suffered emotional highs and lows throughout the sentencing, crying at points and flaring up at others. At one point, he quoted from the Bible and then exclaimed loudly that he did not commit the crime, expressing his belief that the Lord knew he was innocent and that he had only told the truth. He referred to himself as an innocent man who was shackled for no reason other than what Repper and Blakely suggested to his wife. He reminisced about the night his daughter, whom he referred to as his little angel sent down from heaven, was conceived. He encouraged his children to be good citizens, advising them not to cheat, lie, or steal, and to be good neighbors who were quick to forgive. At several points during his speech, he wept, stating that he was an innocent man stripped of his family and wife because of lies. Assistant Ottawa County Prosecutor Lee Fisher remarked that Weingarten's outburst only reinforced the opinion that he had committed the killings, implying that he was definitely not in touch with reality. Fisher added that the conviction provided closure for both families and signified that justice had been served, allowing them to no longer wonder what had happened to their brother and Gail. "My sister's been dead for 27 years, Murphy sobbed. "Now, I can go to her grave and say goodbye. You know, we're done. We're done. We finally got him, Gail and Rick. You can rest in peace now. Detective Blakely retired shortly after the trial ended. Repper said she's not sure who her new partner or what her next cold case investigation will be, but that she hopes to continue to bring justice to victims and closure to their families. This case highlights how hidden secrets can have devastating effects. Wyngarden harbored a dark secret for years before it was uncovered. It demonstrates the psychological and emotional toll of suppressing the truth and how it eventually surfaces. Often with significant consequences, Wyngarden's conviction was largely based on the testimony of his wife, who revealed his confession after decades of marriage. This underscores how trust in relationships can be strained when significant wrongdoings are involved. It also shows how the burden of knowledge can compel individuals to seek justice, even at personal cost. The case remained unsolved for over 20 years, until investigators revisited it using modern interrogation techniques and social dynamics. This underscores the importance of persistence and advancements in forensic science and investigation, which can bring justice even decades after a crime. The murder stemmed from jealousy and unresolved issues within the family. It serves as a reminder that family disputes, if left unchecked, can escalate into tragic outcomes. Communication and conflict resolution within families are crucial, despite the passage of time. The judicial system demonstrated that justice can still be served. This case serves as a reminder to victims' families and society that crimes will not be forgotten, and efforts will continue to uncover the truth. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Bain family. David Cullen Bain was born on March 27, 1972, as the first child of Robin and Margaret Bain, who had married in 1969 when David was 2 years old. Robin decided to become a missionary teacher in Papua New Guinea, so the family moved to Papua New Guinea while living there. The family grew to include 3 more children. David became the oldest sibling, followed by 2 younger sisters, Arawa and Laniet, born 3 years apart, and a younger brother, Stephen, 8 years his junior. During their time in Papua New Guinea, Margaret developed an interest in spiritualism. She began believing in spirits and felt the family needed protection from satanic influences. Over time, Robin's dream of becoming a missionary teacher faded after 14 years. In 1988, the family returned to New Zealand and settled in a large house in Anderson Bay, Dunedin. 3 years later, Robin was appointed headmaster of a small school. However, as promising as this new job sounded, their family still faces many difficulties, and their finances were unstable. By 1994, the relationship between Robin and Margaret had completely broken down. They argued so often that she could no longer bear his presence. She even contemplated the possibility of his death. The family no longer lives normally. The members become cold, and the house is seriously neglected. Over time, the home fell into disrepair, but Robin did nothing to improve it. He was rarely home, spending his weeks living and sleeping in a van near the school on weekends. When he returned, he stayed in another van parked in the yard. The Bain family was deeply dysfunctional. The house was untidy, filthy, and there was no attention to cleanliness. Many people described the house as a pigsty. Robin and Margaret's marriage, like their home, was falling apart. Robin maintained some contact with her children, but the relationship was not particularly close. Later, disturbing allegations would surface, suggesting that Robin had been abusive to his daughter, Laniet. For many years, David has a poor relationship with his father, Robin, but is very attached to his mother, Margaret. In 1994, at the age of 22, he was studying in the music department, aspiring to become an opera singer, although the family faced many difficulties. But all 4 children work or go to school. One of his younger sisters is studying to become a teacher, while his younger brother, Stephen, is still in school. David's education was not easy. He took a few years off from university, but eventually returned to study classical music to make ends meet. He works as a newspaper delivery boy in the morning. There were many problems in the Bain household, and parents should maintain close relationships with each other, as well as with their children. However, in the Bain family, things were different. Each person had their own life and barely communicated with each other. Over time, Margaret became convinced that their troubles stemmed from Robin, whom she believed was possessed by the devil. In her diary, she claimed Robin harbored a demon named Belle. She was so sure of this that she organized an exorcism to exorcise the demon from Robin. Robin's life became miserable. He was forced to live in a camper van and endured Margaret's accusations and rituals whenever he came home. His mental health deteriorated as time went on. He neglected basic hygiene, suffered from severe depression, and seemed to live in a mechanical manner. Colleagues described his behavior as robotic. By June of that year, the family's issues had reached a breaking point, though no one could have predicted the tragic incident that would soon unfold on the morning of Monday, June 20, 1994. Tragedy struck in the Bain household at 7:09 a.m. David made a frantic call to emergency services and reported that they were all dead, saying he had come home to find his whole family dead. Upon investigation, authorities discovered that Margaret, Arawa, and Laniette were dead in their beds. Stephen was also dead, but his body showed signs of a struggle. Robin was found lying on the living room floor, also dead. David's rifle was found in the same room as Robin's body. A computer was turned on nearby, displaying the message, "Sorry, but David is the only one who deserves to live." When police arrived at the scene, they found a horrific scene: 5 people dead. At the outset of the investigation, police focused on 2 main suspects, Robin and David. Since Robin was deceased, the focus shifted toward unraveling what had truly occurred. The crime scene was staged, make investigators believe that Robin was the killer, as he was found in the living room, holding a rifle nearby. A computer displayed a suicide note believed to be from Robin, implying that he had murdered his entire family. The case, in addition to its tragic nature, is becoming increasingly noteworthy given the length of the rifle and the angle at which the bullet entered Robin's head. It was clear that he could not have harmed himself. In addition, the direction of the blood flow from the wound indicated that his head had been moved immediately after his death. This made investigators suspicious and focused their investigation on another suspect, David. The police began questioning David's actions and statements. If Robin had killed the family, why had David been spared? His account raised further doubts. He said he finished delivering newspapers at 6:40 a.m., and a neighbor confirmed seeing he return home at 6:42 a.m. However, he did not call anyone for help for the next 24 minutes, which raised many questions. When questioned by investigators, David explained that he had fainted from shock and did not know what to do. He also could not provide a reasonable explanation for the fresh wounds on his forehead and knees. In addition, the gun found next to Robin's body belonged to David, making the case even more serious. He admitted he was the only one who knew where the rifle was stored and how to access the safe where it was kept. As suspicions towards David grew, the police arrested him 4 days after the incident, charging him with the murder of his 5 family members. Digital forensics became critical to the investigation, as it was discovered that the computer used to type the note had been turned on at 6:44 a.m. based on witness testimony and David's own account. He returned home at 6:42 a.m., meaning the computer was turned on after his arrival. In the following days, new evidence emerged that proved Robin's innocence. Specifically, there was no blood found on his clothes, including the shoes and socks he was wearing that day. In addition, the rifle did not have his fingerprints. If he harms himself, His fingerprints would have been on the gun. Additionally, no traces of gunpowder were found on him, despite this mounting evidence. Just 17 days after the Bain family murders, relatives decided to burn down the house. They were concerned that teenagers might set fire to the empty house and potentially harm themselves. To prevent this, the relatives took it upon themselves to demolish the house before setting the house on fire. They invited the fire department to supervise. Within minutes, the house was engulfed in bright flames. Visible from a great distance, the smoke lingered in the area for over an hour. A legal expert questioned the legality of the action, doubting whether the legal issues regarding the ownership of the house had been fully resolved. However, David, as the heir and trustee, stated that he never wanted to see the house again. He agreed to demolish it and replace it with something else. As he considered the house to be completely worthless, the investigators could only work with the evidence they already had. Many people believe that the house burned down so quickly that it became strange and suspicious. The question is, why were the relatives allowed to destroy the crime scene? Nearly a year later, in May 1995, David's trial finally began. Prosecutors presented a detailed timeline of incident. They argued that, at 5:00 a.m. on June 20, David woke up to the sound of his alarm clock. After getting dressed, he put on a pair of opera gloves, retrieved his rifle, ammunition from the closet, and used a spare key to unlock the trigger lock. He then murdered Arawa, Laniette, and Stephen. During a violent fight with Stephen, David lost a lens from his glasses and suffered multiple injuries, leaving blood at the scene. After the fight, he put his bloody clothes in the washing machine, started it, and took a shower. Then, changing into clean clothes, this left bloodstains in both the laundry room and the bathroom. After cleaning up, he followed his usual routine. He delivered newspapers and returned home at 6:42 a.m. He went upstairs, turned on his computer at 6:44 a.m., typed a message, and waited for his father, Robin, to arrive. Robin typically entered the house to pray at 7:00 a.m., and that day was no exception. David hid behind the living room curtain, waited for Robin to kneel in prayer, then attacked Robin at close range. Finally, he staged the scene to make it appear as if Robin had harmed himself. At 7:09 a.m., he called emergency services, pretending to be distraught. However, in court, David presented a completely different version of events. David claimed he woke up at his usual time, prepared the newspapers, and left the house with his dog. He said he returned home at 6:42 a.m., went to his room to take off his shoes, and then went downstairs to wash his hands and put his clothes in the washing machine. According to David, there was no blood anywhere. When he returned to his bedroom, he noticed bullets on the floor and the lock. Panicking, he searched the house and discovered Margaret, Arawa, Laniette, and Stephen murdered in their bedrooms. He found Robin dead in the living room. David claimed he then fainted for 20 minutes before calling emergency services. David's defense team argued that Robin had killed the family, then turned on the computer, left notes on computer, and ended up harming himself. However, this theory had several inconsistencies. David himself admitted he was the only one who knew where the rifle key was kept. Additionally, he could not explain the injuries he had, or explain the 20 minutes he was unconscious. The prosecution, on the other hand, claimed that he had a financial motive for committing the crime. They argued that he wanted to inherit money and knew that his parents had saved a large sum of money to buy a new house. David Bain was ultimately convicted on all 5 counts of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 16 years. In the following years, the case continued to attract public attention. News of the Bain family tragedy spread rapidly across the country, sparking intense debate, and opinions are divided as to who is really responsible. One person particularly intrigued by the case was former rugby player and celebrity Joe Karam. After retiring from football, he researched and followed the case closely. He believed in David's innocence And over the years, he visited David in prison more than 200 times. He even wrote 4 books about the case. His thorough research and persistent advocacy put enormous pressure on the judicial system, leading to a decision to appeal to the Privy Council. This appeal, which began in May 2007, came 12 years after David's initial imprisonment. The review of the case revealed significant issues. As the investigation uncovered a major error involving David, this led to the quashing of the conviction and a retrial. The Privy Council in London expressed doubts about David's conviction, especially since new evidence had emerged after the trial that had not been disclosed. For instance, one witness, Dean O'Toole, a friend of David's younger sister, Laniette, claimed that Laniette had once confided in her about experiencing incest with their father. Robin, Dean stated that after hearing this, she went home that weekend and shared the information with her family. This testimony could have shed light on Robin's motives in the case. However, at the original trial, the judge said Dean's account was just hearsay and judged her to be an unreliable witness. Therefore, this information was not presented to the jury. Additionally, other troubling details about Robin surfaced over time. For example, he shared stories of violence and cruelty written by his students on the school newsletter, including one about a family murder in 1995. The jury was not given access to this information, making it impossible for David's defense to use it effectively against Robin. Eventually, David was released on bail while awaiting the retrial. During this time, he stayed with Joe for a few months, then moving to Auckland for David. This temporary freedom must have felt like a rare luxury, as he still had to appear in court again a year later. In March 2009, the trial resumed. David and all those involved faced the nightmare. Once again, he continued to deny the murders of his 5 family members, and his defense team again insisted that Robin was the one who murdered his family. This time, the defense had more evidence to explain why Robin killed his family. They argued that Robin suffered from severe depression, was frequently anxious when interacting with colleagues and friends, while also facing personal problems. Additionally, Laniette was about to reveal a secret about her incestuous relationship with her father, Robin. This may have affected Robin's mental state. The retrial lasted 3 months, but the jury needed less than a day to reach a unanimous verdict. David was found not guilty on all 5 counts of murder after spending 13 years in prison and another 2 years being treated as a suspect. David was acquitted and released. However, there are still skeptics who believe he is the killer. On the other hand, there are grounds for suspicion that Robin was the killer. He was very dissatisfied with his life, and if rumors of his unhealthy relationship with his daughter, Laniette, are true, that may have sent him into a state of panic. Several diaries found in Robin's truck, along with disturbing testimony from his co-workers, have painted him as a troubled and unstable individual. This case remains a highly controversial subject, and there are many conflicting opinions. David sought compensation for his wrongful conviction due to the high-profile nature of the case. The New Zealand Justice Minister appointed overseas judges to assess David's claim. The review concluded that he was entitled to compensation for his losses. However, by the time the necessary documents were completed, the Justice Minister had resigned, and his successor disagreed with the terms of the compensation. However, David was eventually compensated for his wrongful imprisonment. In 2016, he received $925 to resolve the matter. During this time, he rebuilt his life. He found a job as an engineer, fell in love, got married, and had a child. He also legally changed his name. There are rumors that the family has since moved to Australia. Meanwhile, a new house has been built on the site where the Bain family home once stood before it burned down. Hello, everyone. Today, we will learn about another case, the case of Alexandra Duxet. Alexandra Duxet, a talented and ambitious young woman, was once the pride of her family and friends, with a promising career in the entertainment industry. With her radiant appearance, intelligence, and burning passion, Alexandra appeared in many television shows and relentlessly pursued her big dream. But everything suddenly stopped one day in May 2006, when she was found brutally murdered in the basement of her family's home in Milford, Connecticut. Alexandra's tragic death not only shocked the community, but also opened a years-long investigation, revealing haunting hidden corners of the person who took her life. Alexandra was born on December 9, 1979, in New Haven, Connecticut, USA. Her relatives called her Sandra. She grew up on the coast, just an hour outside of New York. In the Milford area, Alexandra's parents were named John and Linda. The girl's parents met in 1974 in Connecticut, and a few months later, they got married. Alexandra had two older brothers. Despite the age difference, they were very close. The brothers looked after their younger sister and helped their parents. They all played sports together and spent most of their time playing games. They lived in a big house, and Alexandra used the basement as her room. Later, she equipped it not only as a bedroom, but also as a gym, where she invited friends over for overnight stays and socializing. Alexandra was engaged in dancing and gymnastics in high school. She had a dream of becoming an actress, which quite corresponded with her ambitious and active character. She had been dancing throughout her childhood, and in her youth, she began to take part in various competitions, earning awards along the way. She had a very busy schedule. In addition to dancing, Alexandra continued her studies to get a degree in law. After receiving her secondary education, she entered college. Alexandra completed dance courses and then got a part-time job at a bank. While working there, she met her first love, a guy named Matthew Pugh. Both loved sports and worked hard. Alexandra was able to obtain a bachelor's degree in finance and became a systems analyst at the same bank where she had worked for several years prior. She dedicated almost 10 years to this business, and in parallel, she received a license as a real estate agent. At the age of 23, Alexandra also became an assistant teacher at the dance academy. Career successes accompanied her, and later, Alexandra performed a lot in New York, dancing at events and even starring in music videos. At 26, she began working with a producer from Atlanta to create demo versions of videos for music albums. Her dreams began to materialize. An agent in New York who helped her pass auditions, and as a result, she landed supporting roles in a popular TV series for Alexandra. It was a significant milestone, despite the secondary role. She believed it was only a stepping stone to greater success, given the scale of her activities. She had practically no time for a personal life, despite having dated her boyfriend for years. By January 2004, they decided to break up. Alexandra chose to fully concentrate on work and dancing. This decision coincided with a difficult time for her family. Her parents also decided to separate. Her father returned to Florida to be closer to his elderly mother. By this time, Alexandra's brothers had moved away and were living with their own families, leaving her effectively alone with her mother. Despite most of the house being vacated, she continued to live in the basement, which she had equipped for her own purposes. It contained training equipment, as well as a whole stand filled with dance awards. Alexandra lived in the basement with her big dog, and her busy life did not prevent her from attending acting auditions. She had new prospects in cinema during this period, and also became interested in charity work. She collected items and toys for children from low-income families, and later planned to organize a free canteen for those in need with like-minded individuals. However, the situation changed dramatically. On May 19, 2006, Alexandra met her best friend, Nicole, with whom she worked out at the gym. They trained together from 10.15 to 11.15, after which her friend left. Nicole wanted to stay longer at the gym, while Alexandra planned to go home for lunch and to get ready for her evening plans. Around 4 p.m., Nicole called Alexandra, but the call went straight to voicemail. This was unusual, as Alexandra was usually very responsive due to her work requiring frequent phone communication. By 4:03 p.m., Alexandra still had not replied. Meanwhile, Linda, Alexandra's mother, arrived home and noticed the front door was wide open. Alexandra's favorite dog was outside in the courtyard, and her daughter's white Mitsubishi was parked in the driveway. This was odd because the doors were usually closed, and the dog never went outside without a collar and leash. The dog sat outside, wagging its tail, which added to Linda's concern. She was in a panic, trying to understand what had happened. So she entered the house screaming. As Linda moved through the house, her anxiety grew. She went to the basement stairs and noticed large drops of dark red liquids on the floor. When she reached the bottom, she saw another large dark red liquid stain. To her horror, she found Alexandra lying on her back, unresponsive. With a massive pool of red liquid beneath her, Alexandra had a severe head injury and was lying in an unnatural position under a table. The mother initially thought her daughter might have fallen down the stairs and hit her head on the radiator, which had a visible blood stain. Linda rushed to her daughter to check for a pulse, but found none. She could barely regain her composure and managed to call 911 in a state of panic. She screamed into the phone, trying to describe the horrific scene before her. The dispatcher struggled to understand her, as her words were often interrupted by sobs and incoherent mumbling. Eventually, the dispatcher understood that Linda's daughter was lying on the basement floor and showed no signs of life. When several police officers arrived, Linda met them outside. The sight they encountered in the basement was one of the most disturbing they had ever seen. In here, there are traces of a terrible attack, and Alexandra's face was seriously injured. A piece of the knife was found embedded in her skull. The broken handle lay nearby. It was clear that Alexandra had been attacked with a kitchen knife, with such force that the handle had snapped off. Alexandra received blunt force trauma to the face, and her mother discovered that one of Alexandra's trophies was missing. Investigators believe the perpetrator used the trophy to seriously injure Alexandra's face. The police quickly concluded that Alexandra was a murder victim, along with the brutal injuries and the apparent murder weapon. Investigators found a shoe print in the blood. This shoe print lacked a typical tread pattern. Additionally, small traces of blood were found in other areas of the house, including the bathroom on the toilet seat and sink, presumably where the attacker was trying to wash his hands. Moreover, investigators noticed signs of an attempt to clean the red streaks in certain spots around the home. This led law enforcement to suspect that there was a personal motive behind the crime, possibly related to the missing trophy. Given the violent nature of the attack, they believed the culprit was likely someone known to Alexandra. While most furniture and belongings in the apartment were untouched, nearly all the clothes had been removed from the closet, and valuables like jewelry and money were left behind. It appeared the assailant was searching for something specific, which resulted in items being strewn across the bed and floor. The police reported that Alexandra was attacked when she went to the basement. She was pushed down the stairs, suffering her first injury when she hit her head on the radiator. She did not die immediately. As there were clear signs of a struggle, detectives quickly determined that the knife used in the attack had been brought from outside. Since none of the kitchen utensils from the house were missing, investigators accessed a mobile phone belonging to the victim and discovered over 100 phone numbers she was familiar with, all of which needed to be thoroughly examined. During the investigation of the crime scene, another notable detail emerged. A garbage bag had been removed from the trash can. This suggested that the attacker had disposed of it to avoid leaving crucial evidence for the investigators. They believed that he might have changed his clothes, using the large garbage bag to dispose of blood-stained items. Around 5 p.m., Alexandra's brother and her friend Nicole arrived at the scene. Nicole was in a state of hysteria because, having seen Alexandra alive a few hours earlier,
The quiet Milford area where Alexandra lives is filled with people close to her. Including Linda and Nicole, the local community was anxious to know what had happened, but the police refused to provide any comments until they clarified the circumstances of the crime. The house was cordoned off. A friend mentioned that after her workout, Alexandra had planned to get ready for a date with a new guy, whom she intended to meet at a restaurant. Nicole identified the guy as Jason Malone, but she did not know any other details, which making him a person of interest for the police. Detectives and family members of Alexandra were canvassing the area and interviewing residents. In Milford, a place known for its low crime rate, this incident shocked the community. Alexandra was a celebrity known for her minor roles in the TV series Law and Order Now. She herself has become the face of crime reporting. The seriousness of the situation brought national media attention. The police reached out to the media to seek potential witnesses, prompting local journalists to actively search for information. However, neighbors provided conflicting accounts. One man reported seeing a red pickup truck near the scene around 12:03 p.m. that he believed did not belong to anyone in the area. Another neighbor claimed to have seen a black man walking past the victim's house around 4 p.m., who then got into a dark green Honda Accord. Unfortunately, none of the witnesses took photos or remembered the license plate numbers. Meanwhile, detectives were trying to learn more about Jason, who out to be Alexandra's new boyfriend, although they couldn't reach him directly. His sister answered the police's calls and provided information about him, allowing them to invite him to the police station for questioning. When Jason arrived, he appeared nervous, but firmly stated that he had no involvement in the murder. He confirmed that he was Alexandra's new boyfriend, explaining that they met when he visited the bank with a friend. He was shy and told his friend that he found her very attractive. Jason asked his friend to get Alexandra's phone number for him, which she agreed. That evening, she called Jason. They arranged to meet and chat, eventually planning their first date. Jason was a few years older than Alexandra at the time of their meeting. He lived with his mother, having moved out from his ex-girlfriend, with whom he had broken up. Jason was experiencing a tough time, as his relationship with his ex sometimes rekindled and then fell apart again. He worked for an energy company, where he checked electric meters in homes throughout the city. Meanwhile, Alexandra was in no hurry to announce them as a couple. After a 6-year relationship with her ex, she wanted to take a closer look at her new boyfriend and make no statements about him. At the station, Jason reported that he called Alexandra around noon. They had a calm conversation and made plans for the evening, intending to have dinner together. During their phone call, Alexandra suddenly asked him to hold on because she saw her ex-boyfriend outside her house. Jason then heard the door open, and Alexandra asked, "What are you doing here?" but received no response. After the door closed, she picked up her phone again and told Jason she couldn't talk at that moment. Jason suspected that she let someone into her house and then didn't call him back, which made him feel suspicious and a bit jealous. 15 minutes later, when she still hadn't called back, he started to worry. Fortunately, she answered his call at 12:35. They spoke for a few more minutes, but Alexandra didn't mention who had visited her or why. Jason's account helped narrow down the time frame of when Alexandra died, according to Jason. During this period, he was busy with work, driving around the city and checking equipment. After 3 p.m., he went to a clothing store to choose new pants for their date. Around 4:3, he tried calling her again, but she didn't answer. Later, when he went to her house, he noticed police cars nearby. The police talked to the victim's relatives and found out that Alexandra's only ex-boyfriend was Matthew. However, they had broken up 2 years, while detectives were working on obtaining a warrant to examine mobile phones. They spoke with Alexandra's relatives. They learned that her breakup with her ex-boyfriend was not smooth. Linda was aware that Matthew had a criminal record and had treated Alexandra poorly. Their relationship lasted until Matthew was first imprisoned in 1998. During his time in prison, Alexandra supported and visited him, but he ended up serving a long sentence, despite Alexandra's love for him. Doubts about their relationship grew. By January 2004, they officially ended their relationship, partly due to Matthew's increasingly rude and threatening behavior. Although they still communicated, his aggression continued to rise. So was no chance of rekindling their relationship. At this time, Matthew was found living with his wife about 30 minutes from the home of Alexandra on the day the police arrived. He was working at a Papa John's restaurant. The conversation with the police took place right there on the 15th. He mentioned that he had 2 jobs, the second being with a company that manufactures aircraft parts. Located about an hour north of Milford, he claimed he was working from 6:3 a.m. to 3 p.m. on the day of the murder and left home only after learning that Alexandra had died. The police noticed he appeared somewhat confused during the conversation. Matthew appeared to distrust the police, but he did admit that he had spoken to Alexandra on the phone a few days before her death. Their last in-person meeting, however, had occurred at least 4 weeks prior to the tragic event. After this conversation, the detectives left the following day. Matthew returned to the police station and confessed that he had lied during their previous discussion. He clarified that he actually arrived at work at 6:3 a.m., but at 9:15 a.m. he requested time off and left. He spent most of the day at home and went into town to care for a sick relative. Matthew insisted that he was neither in Milford nor close to the suburbs that day. He agreed to take a DNA test and provided the police with the clothes he wore on the day of his ex-girlfriend's death. The investigation continued, and both he and Jason remained the main suspects in the murder. Forensic experts determined that Alexandra had died from multiple stab wounds, cuts, and blunt force trauma. Primarily to her face, the attack was so brutal that she had swallowed several of her own knocked-out teeth before dying. The expert discovered a crucial piece of evidence. A hair found stuck to the dried blood on Alexandra's body did not belong to her. Additionally, pieces of duct tape were found on her face. Apparently, it was used to tape her mouth during the massacre. Investigators looked into Jason's background and found that he had a criminal record. Having served over 5 years for banned substance trafficking, he also drove a car that matched the description given by a neighbor of one of the victims. Another witness reported seeing this dark green car parked near Alexandra's house throughout the day. Despite this, Jason maintained his innocence, arguing that the car model he drove was very common in the city at that time. However, detectives could verify not his alibi of being at a clothing store to buy pants around 3 p.m. He had indeed visited the store, but much later in the evening, which contradicted his statement. Maybe he was trying to mislead the investigation, however, by checking the geolocation data from his phone calls. Investigators found that although his phone was active throughout the day, it never registered in the Milford area. Consequently, the police ruled him out as a suspect. It was now Matthew's turn to be questioned. The police spoke with Alexandra's mother to gather more information about him. She had never liked Matthew. He was 7 years older than Alexandra and had a criminal record. Unlike Alexandra, he showed no interest in personal growth or work. The detectives then contacted his employer, who confirmed that he had left work much earlier than he had claimed. Instead of finishing at 9:15 a.m., he actually left at 8:39 a.m. He had also been at a gas station at 2:1 p.m., not at noon, as he had told the police. The discrepancies in his words were alarming. While he spent time at car dealerships until 4 p.m., the times he provided were incorrect. The investigators suspected that Matthew might be the murderer. On May 26, they obtained a search warrant for his house. Inside, everything was tidy and clean, with nothing suspicious found except for some fine art. It was assumed that the remains of this roll could have been found on the victim's face. However, this did not indicate involvement in the murder. Since many people have electrical tape in their homes, all other tests and analyses failed to link Matthew to the crime. A thorough search of his property yielded no results. Leaving the investigation at a standstill, the only remaining action for the police was to send the electrical tape they had found for lab analysis. This type of tape was quite specific and difficult to find. It was not available in regular stores or online in 2006. Only 3 nearby companies used it, one of which was an aircraft parts plant where Matthew works. The electrical tape found on Alexandra's face had the same adhesive base, which could indicate the real killer. The police decided to contact Matthew's relatives again, and they uncovered important information. Matthew's brother revealed that he had a fierce temper and a potential motive against Alexandra. They discovered that, in 2002, he had given Alexandra his Nissan car and later lent her $2. She broke up with him in January 2004 while he was in prison, and she refused to return anything. It made him very angry. On June 14, detectives re-interrogated the suspect, highlighting the inconsistencies in his story. But Matthew managed to explain each of the disputed points, leaving the police with no new evidence. It wasn't until the end of the year that the DNA test results were available. The tests revealed that all the blood in the basement belonged solely to Alexandra. The blood droplets found in the bathroom were more special, as they belonged to her and a man. However, the concentration was too low to extract precise DNA profiles based on the results of the examination. Experts were able to establish that the killer was a black man. The hair found on Alexandra's hand could not be identified, and none of the fingerprints collected at the crime scene matched the suspects. Additionally, the specific shoe print could not be traced. Consequently, the investigation reached another standstill. A reward of $50 was offered for any information that could help advance the case. In 2010, authorities decided to reach out to prisoners. A photo of Alexandra was shared with correctional facilities. In September 2011, a prisoner named Paula contacted the Milford Police Department. She revealed that her former cellmate, Christopher Richards, had been in a relationship with Alexandra for 2 years before her death. Paula noted that they were together during the time between Alexandra's breakup with Matthew and the start of her relationship with Jason. Surprisingly, this relationship was unknown to others. When Alexandra informed Christopher's about their breakup, he was in prison. He became very angry and told his cellmate that he wanted to kill her. Once he was released, an investigation was launched to look into the situation, and they was discovered that the person who contacted the police had lied. Christopher did not know Alexandra, and there had been no communication between them, which would be unusual in a 2-year relationship. It seemed likely that this prisoner was trying to frame his cellmate. 2 weeks later, a bus driver named Jeremy, who had been friends with Alexandra for a long time, came forward with information. He reported that he had witnessed Alexandra receiving a threatening text from a man named Donovan. Donovan demanded repayment of money that Alexandra had lent him and threatened to kill her if she did not pay him back. Jeremy stated that this occurred just 2 weeks before her death. However, it appeared that Alexandra did not take these threats seriously. Ultimately, this claim was also found to be false. 6 years later, in August 2012, detectives finally received crucial information. Anthony Pugh, Matthew's cousin, reached out to the police station. He revealed details about a gifted car and the $2 that Alexandra had borrowed from her brother. His long story began back in 1993, when Matthew involved him in a criminal scheme. Both were later imprisoned for their actions, and, after being released in 2005 and 2006, they found jobs at the same plant, although they maintained a good relationship. A year later, Matthew betrayed Anthony, leading to Anthony's imprisonment. So, Anthony decided to take revenge by sharing the truth. Anthony disclosed that when Matthew broke up with Alexandra, he became obsessed with her and even considered killing her. Matthew planned to inject her with a lethal dose of drugs to make it look like an accidental overdose. However, upon learning about her new relationship, he changed his mind and opted for a more violent method of murder. The brothers worked at the same aircraft factory, where Matthew stole gloves and special tape to commit a crime. Police believe he wanted to profit from this information, and he later admitted it directly. Anthony sought not only $50, but also sought revenge on his brother. When the information was verified, it was found that during the initial data analysis, the police overlooked that Matthew was indeed in the area near Milford at around 11.47, but left at 12.07. He returned and stayed at the scene for over an hour. Ultimately, the police had strong grounds to arrest Matthew and file charges against him. On August 24, 2012, Matthew Pugh was charged with first-degree murder and home invasion. However, at that time, he was already in prison for assaulting a woman in 2008. He threatened the victim with a weapon and stole her purse when she tried to resist. He's attacked her in the arm. The prosecutor's office found out that the problems with Matthew began after Alexandra wrote to the prison that she wanted to break up. According to cellmates, he was obsessed with her. In response, he wrote an 8-page letter over a couple of months, of course. He was angry because of these events, but after leaving prison, he did not show any aggression towards his ex. He started a relationship and even had a child. But at the same time, Matthew, all this time, hatched a plan. 3 years later, in February 2015, Matthew appeared in court. The prosecution claimed that the guy committed a deliberate massacre on the basis of jealousy. The lawyer insisted that the client was not involved in the murder because there was no direct evidence in the form of DNA and fingerprints at the crime scene. The situation for Matthew became completely stalemate when he began to answer the prosecution's questions. He desperately tried to prove his innocence, but it all didn't seem very plausible. Besides, his brother was testifying against him. The jury went to pass sentence. It was really not easy. In this complicated story, there were many blank spots, and many considered the accused a pathological liar. It was even necessary to ask the court to repeat Matthew's story only 3 days later. The jury found him guilty of first-degree murder and trespassing. He was sentenced to 60 years in prison for murder and another 20 for trespassing. The Alexandra Duxie case is a heartbreaking and complex one that leaves many unanswered questions, from the tangled relationships between Alexandra and those around her to the doubts about who took her life. The case remains one of the most controversial and haunting in Milford, Connecticut, although the killer, Matthew Pugh, has been convicted. Stories of motives, complicated relationships, and unclear details continue to haunt the public. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of Maria Marta Arias. Maria was born in 1984 in Laborde, a town in Santiago del Estero province, northwest Argentina. Her mother, Maria Olga Alonso, raised Maria alongside her 2 sons, Claudio and Juan. On her own, the brothers were very protective of their little sister, whom they affectionately called Marta from a young age. Maria was known for her incredible kindness towards others. She was a bright student who excelled in her studies, especially enjoying the challenge of learning new languages. To foster this passion, her mother enrolled her in an English course at a private institute, where Maria met a boy named Pablo. Pablo was born in 1983 into a middle-class family in La Banda, Santiago del Estero. Pablo grew up with his mother and his older sister. When Pablo was 14, he was accidentally involved in a dangerous incident that resulted in the death of a friend of the same age. The case was not legally prosecuted because Pablo was too young and had no criminal intent. However, the emotional impact of the incident stayed with him, especially after he moved to Cordoba to continue her studies. Feeling isolated, Pablo underwent significant changes. Those around him noticed he had become quick-tempered and prone to conflicts. Eventually, he developed an addiction to banned substance in an effort to turn his life around. Pablo enrolled in a rehabilitation program, although the journey was difficult and took over 3 years, but he succeeded in becoming a healthier person. Motivated by his recovery, he began assisting his family with their business. During this time, he also trained in martial arts and performed well. Meanwhile, Maria grew into a quiet and modest young woman. She was externally attractive, with fair skin, long, straight hair, and large, light eyes. Family members described her as a sweet-natured, naive beauty who was easily misled. In 2004, Maria was diagnosed with lupus, a serious illness that affects the joints and muscles and causes inflammation of the organs. She needed immediate treatment and started a long-term care plan as soon as she left the hospital, carefully following all medical instructions to prevent flare-ups during this period. Pablo faced his own difficulties. He was deeply affected by the sudden death of his father, and shortly after, his mother suffered a severe injury in an accident that left her in chronic pain and unable to fully recover. One day, while playing, Pablo learned that a healer priest was visiting the local church. He took his mother there, hoping she would recover. At the church, they ran into Maria. They had not seen each other in years, enjoyed a friendly conversation, and agreed to meet again. Their communication resumed, and soon Pablo told his mother that he had found a soulmate and planned to bring her home. At that time, Maria was a third-year student at the National University of Santiago del Estero, studying economic sciences. She is slim and very attractive. Pablo, who was nearly 2 meters tall and weighed 150 kilograms, felt he needed to lose weight to get Maria's attention. To do this, he started using a popular herbal dietary product. By 2005, he had lost 40 kilograms in just a few months. Crediting this rapid weight loss to the miraculous product, his life began to revolve around this substance, which he believed was almost magical. He also told Maria about a potential new drug being developed to treat lupus. In 2007, Pablo and Maria officially became a couple. When Maria's brothers first met Pablo at their home, Juan quietly asked their mother why he was there. It was evident that Pablo's presence was not well received by the family, but they chose not to confront the issue. Over time, Pablo gained more control over Maria's life, and she placed complete trust in him. This eventually led him to convince her to stop her prescribed lupus treatment and switch to his products, which he claimed were far more effective. During a sales conference, Pablo proudly showcased Maria as a testament to the effectiveness of the products, claiming her health had improved since she started taking them. However, this was not true. The product he promoted contained a large amount of sodium, which was contraindicated for someone with lupus. In mid-2007, in one of the churches in Santiago, they vowed to love and respect each other for life, exchanging rings and smiling. Their marriage was not officially registered, but they became a well-known couple in the dietary product industry, achieving significant income, which that raised concerns in the Arias family, of course. The Arias family was not envious of Maria's success. Instead, they were concerned because Maria was working non-stop, which was endangering her health. Additionally, after getting married, Maria distanced herself from her family, which was uncharacteristic of her. Maria's mother, Olga, sensed something was wrong and suspected that her daughter was avoiding visits to spare the family worry. Many acquaintances of Maria noted that the husband and wife seemed to compete openly in selling products. Initially, it appeared to be a playful rivalry, but it eventually turned into hostility. One day, an incident occurred, the details of which were never fully clarified. Several photographs emerged, showing Maria lying on a bed in a compromising state. Questions arose about whether these pictures were taken by her husband, herself, or perhaps someone else. At the end of October 2007, they were going to the neighboring province, Tucumán, to attend a congress on brand promotion. Luis Ramon Paz was among those who accompanied them on the trip. Maria and Pablo joked and were in a good mood. At the congress, Pablo gave a speech, but he felt not very comfortable because of the standing hot weather. The air temperature in that area rises very high, and there is humidity, which seriously affected Pablo's health. tall, and still suffering from excess weight. He read out his report in dark clothes. It was clear that he was not feeling well. He kept stumbling, and his friend Luis noticed this after a while. In a conflict situation, shouting and waving his fists, Pablo tried to fight with another employee of the company, Bader. Suspecting him of intending to take away his clients, Bader did not enter the fight soon. Maria intervened and calmed her husband down. Pablo told Luis that he wanted to return to Santiago, but Luis refused. Pablo got behind the wheel, and he and Maria left the venue of the Congress. After some time, they were seen together in Independence Square. They walked past boutiques with pirated copies of famous films. Pablo walked ahead and was in a hurry, while Maria tried to catch up with him and pulled on Pablo's shirt. Pablo tried to walk as fast as he could to escape a scary voice in his head. Later, they continue home for the next 2 hours. Pablo runs away from the threatening voice, he says. The voice is chasing him. Maria accompanied her husband, unable to leave him alone in such a state, repeatedly switching from taxis to buses and back. Eventually, they returned to the cathedral in front of Independence Square, which was only 3 blocks from the starting point in the cathedral. It was noisy. There were crying babies waiting for baptism at the evening mass. The clock showed 5 p.m., and Maria rushed inside. Perhaps Pablo wanted to calm the inner voice, or maybe he just wanted to imitate madness in front of witnesses. Pablo and Maria stood first in line. Not respecting those who came earlier, Pablo approached the priest and asked for his priest to be reinstated. The priest told him to step aside and wait, but Pablo refused to back down. Meanwhile, Pablo called a photographer who was working with another client nearby when the priest reached out and touched Pablo's face. Photograph captured the moment perfectly in a photo before leaving the cathedral. Pablo took a sip of holy water. The priest noticed Pablo's anxious movements and sweating, as well as Maria's evident distress when the photographer searched for they to give them the picture. He couldn't find them. Concerned by her husband's unusual behavior, Maria sought help from her friends, leaving Pablo alone. While at Independence Square, Pablo saw a policeman. Pablo asked to be arrested. The officer was taken aback and summoned a patrol. Pablo got into a police car, which drove him to the station. Once there, he calmly entered and requested some water. After drinking a glass, he lay down on the floor and started drinking directly from the tap. At that moment, Walter Cancino, a friend of his, walked into the police station. Ignoring Walter, Pablo began promoting a dietary product to the officers, who laughed and called him crazy. Despite their mocking, he persisted in wanting to sell medicine and repeated his wish to be sent to prison instead of being incarcerated. He was taken to the hospital. In the hospital, Pablo caused a disturbance and accidentally knocked over a medical cart filled with surgical instruments. The examining doctor confirmed that his health was stable and reassured him that everything was okay. Advising him to get some rest, Pablo remained under police protection until his wife arrived. When they reunited 1 hour later, he was calm and mentioned that he would explain his earlier behavior soon. That same night, Walter was staying with his wife at the Catalina Park Hotel. The hotel's facade, beautifully illuminated, was quite striking. In the first-floor bar, there was a shiny piano, and the stage featured expensive artwork. Walter and his wife sat at a table discussing Pablo's unusual behavior. After midnight, Maria and her husband checked into the same hotel as Walter. Receiving room 514, they exchanged greetings with acquaintances in the bar and were seen ascending in the elevator together, holding hands. When they entered the room, Pablo removed his trousers and his sweat-soaked shirt. Maria also undressed, and they both lay down on the bed without saying a word. After a while, Maria turned her back to Pablo. At that moment, he climbed on top of her, pressed one knee against her chest, and grabbed her neck with both hands. Squeezing tightly, he didn't release her until she stopped showing any signs of life, using a scalpel that he had stolen. Pablo made cuts on Maria's eyelids and struck her several times with the scalpel. He then pulled her by the hair, dragging her out of the room and down to the first floor Hotel staff intervened, and police officers soon arrived. There were screams, panic. This horrific crime shocked the entire province, and news of it spread throughout Argentina. Pablo was taken to a psychiatric hospital, where he was placed in a ward with barred windows. The next day, a local newspaper published a photograph of Pablo sleeping on a small bed that could barely support his 120-kilogram weight while he was tied up. The police faced a challenging case. First, they needed to determine whether Pablo was mentally competent when he committed his actions. Then, they had to find the appropriate legal classification for his behavior at that time. Judicial officials did not have the same legal guidelines that exist today. Prosecutor could not charge Pablo with murder with aggravating circumstances because he is not married. He was not officially in a relationship with Maria. They had only been engaged in a church ceremony. Additionally, the concept of domestic violence was not recognized back then. One of the local newspapers purchased the photo of Pablo and the priest from the photographer for a small sum, even though the photographer knew it was worth more, but accepted this offer. After the crime, while in the hospital, Pablo read the Bible, slept, and experienced periodic episodes of distress. Meanwhile, forensic doctors revealed the autopsy results of Maria's body, which showed horrific injuries. Following the autopsy report, the court added the charge of desecration of a corpse to the existing charges against Pablo. In April 2008, a specialized medical board conducted a mental assessment of Pablo to determine whether he was mentally competent to stand trial. After a thorough examination, the board concluded that Pablo was mentally fit to participate in the proceedings without any mental health adjustments. He was therefore charged with aggravated murder and ordered transferred from the hospital to a standard prison. He was taken to Villa Urca prison, one of the most notorious detention facilities in the area, where conditions were extremely harsh. There, Pablo was housed with 5 prisoners considered the most dangerous, those with serious criminal records during his early years in prison. Pablo maintained a relationship with a missionary who had visited him regularly since the murder. However, over time, this relationship gradually faded and eventually ended. A few days later, Pablo attended his first hearing, an event that quickly became a sensation. He was accompanied by at least 10 members of the Prison Service's Special Strike Team. Their large presence caused a stir, with journalists scrambling to get close enough to interview him. Upon arriving at the investigation department, Pablo encountered prosecutor, but before she could speak, he requested a cigarette. While the judge read the charges against him, he fidgeted with his clothing. Attempting to button up, he took a seat across from the case manager and listened quietly to the accusations. Pablo then announced that he would not give any testimony to the defense. Meanwhile, the prosecution's lawyer, Mario Leiva, presented the argument that Pablo could not have acted in a state of extreme psychological agitation, since a person who was insane could not have carried out such a brutal act as cutting out the victim's eyeballs with such precision and skill without damaging them. Leiva also alleged that Pablo was jealous of Maria, whom he considered a dangerous competitor. The unhealthy competition between the two came to a head that fateful day. Furthermore, Leiva hypothesized that the biggest sign that Pablo had planned his crime was the insane behavior he displayed in the hours before the incident. According to Leiva, that act of feigning insanity was simply a strategy to avoid responsibility and create a cover for himself. Leiva described the behavior as to evade responsibility for the planned crime he committed before the members of the medical commission, after conducting a comprehensive assessment of Pablo's mental state, came to the conclusion that he was fully competent and responsible before the law. Their view was consistent with the view that Pablo could participate in criminal proceedings without any mental health adjustments throughout the trials. Pablo remained surprisingly calm, even somewhat indifferent, as if the events surrounding him had no impact on him. He seemed unconcerned with the seriousness of the charges. This indifferent attitude has sparked much public controversy, causing many to feel uncomfortable and question his true attitude towards the consequences of his actions. The only person visibly distressed by his behavior was his mother, Graciela Beatriz Rodriguez, who pleaded with those present to treat her son with respect as he left the courtroom, despite his inappropriate gestures throughout the trial. On June 13, 2008, during the ongoing hearing, the defense stated that the defendant wished to testify this time. Pablo controlled himself and did not act dramatically when sharing his account of the events. Pablo expressed his love for his wife and his regret for his actions. However, he clarified that his regret was not due to being on trial or fearing punishment, but because he missed Maria when asked about his actions with a surgical scalpel. He chose to remain silent since the tragic death of her daughter. Olga has been unable to sleep in her grief. She has begun to believe that her son-in-law is the culprit. The act of blinding Maria has led her to believe that her daughter must have seen something terrible about Pablo, a dark secret that he wants to hide at all costs. She struggled to find out the reason for this crime. During investigation, the killer's scalpel was never found. Investigators dismissed the idea that Pablo had flushed it down the toilet or thrown it out of the window. They searched under the building's windows, but discovered nothing. The lawyer speculated that Pablo might have passed the scalpel to friends staying at the same hotel. However, the friends who were questioned claimed they only learned about the incident later and did not hear anything unusual at the time. Judge tried to reach Pablo's mind, but, which seemed impossible, Pablo's senseless position was preserved when the judge asked him about his relationship with Maria after the absurd chatter. Pablo returned to his seat and began to grimace. Interrupting the course of the hearing, he continued to adjust his clothes, unbuttoning them repeatedly, shifting in his chair and yawning. At 11 a.m., members of the court threw him out, but it did not help. One of the worst actions of Pablo during those days was when he asked the secretary if she wanted him to gouge out his and the lawyer's eyes. His only goal was to convince everyone of his madness. But his mental state was analyzed by 15 experts, and 13 of them stated that the man was perfectly aware of everything at the time. The most emotional moment of the murder trial was the speech of Juan and Claudio, Maria's brothers. They spoke about how many hours a day their sister worked, even to the detriment of her own health, to please her demanding husband, Pablo. They described him as an extremely jealous man who psychologically pressured his wife, according to Juan and Claudio. Their brother-in-law was obsessed with non-existent conspiracies against himself and unreasonably questioned Maria's fidelity. The men claimed that Pablo deliberately forbade his wife to communicate with her relatives and then completely senselessly and cruelly deprived her of life. As they walked out of the court, the two brothers could not hide their emotions, their faces heavy with sadness and their eyes red. Finally, unable to hold back any longer, they hugged each other tightly as tears welled up in their eyes. In that moment, their bond of family became a source of strength to help them continue their search for justice. In September 2009, the judges of the Second Department of the Criminal Court declared Pablo guilty of murder with particular cruelty, arguing that he simulated insanity in order to deceive the court administration and achieve impunity or a less severe punishment before sentencing. He was given the opportunity to confess, but Pablo was determined not to change his testimony, as in all previous. He was eventually given a life sentence in September 2011. The country's Supreme Court upheld this decision some time later. It became known from the news that Pablo had learned to play the violin while sitting behind bars and that he had been denied a request to study law. The authorities stated that he was not allowed to study because of the heinous crime for which he was convicted and due to serious problems in prison. It turned out that he portrayed himself as a victim of other prisoners and allegedly barely survived in this hell. However, over time, Pablo won the respect of his cellmates and took on a leading position One of the facts that indicated prisoners considered him a respected person was that he filed complaints in the Argentine court regarding the inhuman treatment he faced, which also affected other prisoners. This leadership role forced representatives of the penal system to choose him several times to resolve conflicts with rebels in prison. Pablo did not participate in riots, and if problems arose, he sat out the time. According to some media outlets, Pablo spent time studying the works of Alex Day, a well-known motivator and author of self-help books. In 2017, Pablo met a woman hairdresser who was visiting another prisoner in the same prison. They began to communicate, and the new year became a double holiday for Pablo because in December, he married his beloved after a civil ceremony. A religious ceremony of initiation into marriage took place in the presence of relatives. Although they were separated by thick concrete prison walls, the wife repeatedly overcame great distances and came on a date to Pablo. Close men said that this unexpected love inspired him to write poems and songs while he had almost lost heart, not hoping to be released. Sometime later, after numerous court hearings and listening to reports from a psychologist and stories from people who had communicated with Pablo in prison, the Tucumán court allowed him temporary releases twice a month for 3 hours. The decision was made on June 29 of the year, however. When was asked about his opinion, a psychologist spoke out against it. In his opinion, psychological and psychiatric reports stated that Pablo should not be released into society under any circumstances, mainly because he was still a person unable to control his emotions. In contrast, another doctor, Lorado, spoke out in favor of providing the said concession. According to his assessments, Pablo has not posed any danger to others for many years. Lorado claimed that as a doctor, he can promptly identify the deterioration of a prisoner's mental health and intervene to eliminate the problem. In his opinion, Pablo will no longer attack other people. Pablo was finally allowed to leave prison, marking a major turning point in his life after years of incarceration. This decision was made on the condition that he be closely monitored by 3 members of the Tucumán Prison Administration to ensure his security. A tracking device was attached to his wrist, allowing authorities to track his movements at all times. The guards not only accompanied him on the way to his residence to meet his wife, but also ensured that he returned to detention on time. This change was a privilege for him. Pablo and his new wife have a daughter. The desire to be close to and care for her was one of the main reasons why Pablo was approved to leave prison. This is also part of a legal policy in Argentina that allows people serving sentences the opportunity to reintegrate into society in exceptional cases. Under current law, Pablo will have the opportunity to apply for parole after serving 35 years in prison, which would be in 2042. Until then, he will have to comply with strict rules and maintain good behavior to be considered for a reduced sentence in the years to come. During that long period of time, his rights, such as reduced sentences or access to reintegration programs, will depend on the authorities' assessment. There are still many challenges ahead. Leaving prison this time is an important start, allowing Pablo not only to reconnect with his family, but also to gradually demonstrate his change to society. The family of Maria Marta Arias have expressed anger and heartbreak at the court's decision to allow the man who killed their loved one to walk free. For them, this is not only an injustice, but also a mockery and insult to the pain they have endured. They feel as if the dangerous killer is being given the chance to live a normal life, despite the irreparable damage he has caused their family. Despite their anger and frustration, Maria's relatives have been forced to accept that they have no choice but to comply with the decision of the justice system. While they want to fight to the end, they realize that changing the verdict is impossible. They bitterly admit that the freedom of Pablo serves as a constant reminder of what they have lost forever. However, her family insists that this does not mean that they will give up on demanding justice and speaking out against injustice. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of April Millsap. What could happen to a young woman simply walking through a quiet suburban neighborhood that is considered one of the safest in America? Normally, there would be nothing to worry about, but when a real predator lurks in the shadows, even the safest places can become the scene of a horrific tragedy. April Millsap, 14 years old by the summer of 2014. She was living with her family in Armada, a small town in Michigan, USA. April was a friendly and sweet girl who attended a local high school. She was an only child, and her parents had divorced when she was 6. After the divorce, her mother began a relationship with another man, who later became April's stepfather. April quickly grew close to her stepfather, and they developed a warm bond. April was a cheerful girl with a sense of humor, always bringing joy to her family. Her positive attitude helped her form a close circle of friends. She was creative, loved drawing, stayed active, and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. Despite her young age, April seemed mature and independent by the time she turned 14. She often walked her dog alone and enjoyed spending time with her friends while maintaining a close relationship with her family. April also had a boyfriend named Austin Schutt, who was a year older than her. They attended the same school and had been dating for about a year at the time of these events. In 2014, the town of Armada had a population of about 1.7 people. It was considered a safe and family-friendly place where everyone knew each other. However, as life sometimes proves, even the safest places can attract danger. Crimes in Armada were rare, but when they did occur, they caused significant alarm. On July 24, 2014, the summer holidays were in full swing. That day, April didn't have any plans to go out or meet friends. She slept until noon and spent most of the day on her computer, chatting with friends and playing games. Around 6 p.m., she decided to take her dog, Penny, for a walk. April often brought Penny along when she met friends or her boyfriend, Austin. That evening, she chose one of her usual walking routes, which she often used to relax. Her walks typically lasted no more than an hour. Her mother, Jennifer, waited for her at home without concern, but when an hour and a half passed and April still hadn't returned, Jennifer became increasingly anxious when April didn't respond to her calls or text messages. So she reached out to April's boyfriend, assuming they might be together. However, Austin told her he hadn't seen April all day and had only communicated with her online. Jennifer's worry deepened, and she began contacting April's friends and classmates, but no one knew where April could be. About half an hour later, there was a knock at the door, hoping it was April returning from her walk. Jennifer felt a brief sense of relief. Instead, she found Austin and his friends standing on the doorstep. They had come to check on April because they were also concerned. Austin then showed Jennifer a message he had received from April at 6:28 p.m., roughly 40 minutes after she had left the house to walk the dog. Although Austin initially said he hadn't heard from her, he admitted to seeing the message later, either because he hadn't noticed it right away or he had been out of network coverage at the time. The message contained a chilling statement: "They tried to kidnap me." Alarmed by this, Austin had immediately started searching for her, realizing the seriousness of the situation. Jennifer called her husband, who at work, alarmed. He left his job immediately to join the search. He joined Jennifer and Austin, and the three decided to split up to cover more ground along the routes April usually walked. Jennifer also contacted the police, who promptly joined the efforts to find April. Shortly afterward, April was found. A man and a woman jogging along one of the trails came across a dog on a leash. Penny, the dog, seemed extremely agitated when the woman attempted to grab the leash. Penny ran off, but stopped periodically, as if trying to guide them somewhere. They followed Penny into a dense thicket, where they discovered the body of a girl. The victim was later identified as 14-year-old April Millsap by the time her family arrived. Forensic experts were already working at the site. In Armada, the local police force consisted of only 2 officers, neither of whom was trained for cases of this nature Serious crimes were almost unheard of in the area, and the small force was sufficient for handling minor issues like petty theft. However, this case was different. None of the local officers had ever dealt with a violent murder, and their investigative resources were minimal. The sheriff immediately reached out to more capable authorities at the county level. Law enforcement from other regions was quickly brought in to assist with the investigation. As they had more resources and experience, April was discovered lying on her back at the bottom of a ravine. Her shoes had been removed and were found a few meters away. Her clothing and underwear had been pulled off, suggesting a clear abuse motive. However, further investigation revealed that she had not been abused. Detectives theorized that the attacker may have attempted but failed, possibly because April fought back fiercely or because something like a passerby or the dog interrupted the assault. Regardless, she was subjected to a brutal beating. Her body was covered in bruises, ranging from defensive wounds to severe injuries on her face, which was so disfigured it appeared almost crushed. The forensic examination identified at least 48 separate injuries, many concentrated on her face and neck. Her body was covered in dried blood. There were signs of compression on her neck, but they didn't match the typical patterns seen in manual strangulation or the use of an object. Instead, the injuries on her face and neck bore unusual marks, which forensic analysis confirmed were caused by the tread of a shoe. This indicated that the attacker had stomped on her repeatedly. The forensic report concluded that April's death was the result of being trampled. Marks resembling the sole of a large sneaker were found on her head and neck. Considering the level of violence and the potential motive, investigators believed the perpetrator was likely a large man. The forensic expert concluded that the attack lasted over 10 minutes, during which the girl endured immense agony before dying. Identifying the victim initially proved difficult due to the severe facial injuries, which rendered her unrecognizable. Similarly, her mother was already unidentifiable from the start. The girl's stepmother, boyfriend, and the boyfriend's friend were brought in for police questioning to narrow down the list of possible suspects. The initial investigation focused on her mother, Jennifer, to determine if there were any events or threats that could be related to the case. However, investigators quickly determined that Jennifer had no conflicts, troubles, or unusual events related to her daughter's death. After ruling this possibility out, they turned their attention to April's boyfriend, Austin. To continue to clarify the details of the case, suspicion arose when Austin admitted that his relationship with the victim had been strained recently. They argued often and were on the brink of breaking up shortly before the murder. They had a heated argument. Adding to investigators' doubts was a chilling message April had sent to Austin just before the crime. She told him that someone had attempted to kidnap her, but he chose to ignore this alarming warning. Austin claimed he couldn't respond because the message arrived too late for him to see it. It seems there was a delay in delivery. Detectives noted that after receiving the message, he reacted very slowly, did not inform the police, and instead decided to search for her on his own. Austin explained that he was still upset with his girlfriend and believed the message was an attempt to manipulate him. He thought she was trying to provoke his attention and concern to push him toward reconciliation, not realizing the gravity of the situation regarding the quarrel. Austin insisted that April's behavior was incomprehensible. The most recent conflict had seemingly come out of nowhere, and he couldn't clearly explain the reasons behind their disagreements. Instead, he placed the blame on her. This only deepened the detective's suspicions, as it suggested Austin might have had a motive for the attack. In many cases, such incidents are committed by partners. As a result, the officers decided to detain him longer and asked him to tell them how his day went in all the details in order to analyze his movements and establish an alibi. Austin said that around 4 p.m., he met a friend to help carry a TV into a house. Afterward, they went to the nearest McDonald's for a snack. His account was later confirmed by surveillance camera footage from the cafe, which showed him there at the specified time. around 6:30 p.m. Just a few minutes after the message about the attempted kidnapping was sent, it became clear that Austin could not have been involved in the murder, since Austin was ruled out as the killer. Investigators turned their attention to the victim's mobile phone, hoping it might provide crucial information. They suspected April might have received a message from the stalker pursuing her, but her mobile phone could not be found at the crime scene. Detectives theorized that the killer had taken it, turned it off to prevent tracking, and discarded it elsewhere to find the phone and other evidence. A thorough search was conducted along the route April was believed to have taken, but no clues were initially found. Law enforcement, specialized dogs, and the FBI joined the search effort after nearly a full day of searching with no results. A breakthrough occurred the next day. The girl's mobile phone was discovered about a kilometer from the crime scene and was immediately sent to a forensic lab for analysis around the same time. News of the brutal attack spread widely through local newspapers and TV channels. Authorities appealed for witnesses who might have noticed anything unusual on the trail near the time of the crime. However, in the early stages, this only heightened public fear and anxiety. What shocked people most was the sheer brutality of the attack and the fact that it occurred in broad daylight, leaving everyone feeling unsafe. Then, a girl came forward to the police with potentially valuable information. She explained that around 6 p.m. on the day April was killed, she was at home looking out her window when she noticed a white van she had never seen before passing by. A man was driving, with another young man in the passenger seat. The van was moving very slowly, as if the occupants were searching for something or someone. This struck her as odd. When they noticed her watching from the window, they stopped and stared at her, even pointing toward her house. The encounter made her feel uneasy. Afterward, they drove away. Upon hearing about April's murder, the girl became worried that these two men might have been involved. She feared they could have spotted April as a target and attacked her. Detectives found this information reliable and important to the investigation. They considered it plausible that a white van had been driving around the area looking for a victim, and April was unfortunate enough to catch the men's attention. The police appealed to the public once again, sharing a description of the white van and a composite sketch of the two men inside, hoping to gather more reliable leads. The following day, a man and his friend contacted the police. They admitted to driving a van in the area that evening. They explained that they were construction workers and had been driving slowly through the neighborhood because the driver wanted to show his colleague some houses where he had previously worked. One of these houses happened to be where the girl lived. Their account was verified, and local residents confirmed their story. Clearing them of suspicion, the men were eager to assist the investigation in any way they could. The day after the incident, several people contacted the police to report a suspicious motorcycle and its driver. Witnesses reported seeing a schoolgirl walking her dog along a path around 6:30 p.m. They noted that she wasn't alone at the time. She was accompanied by an older man who was pushing his motorcycle by hand. The two appeared to be walking and talking casually at the time. The witnesses assumed the man was her father, as his behavior seemed calm and April showed no signs of fear. However, upon reflecting on the situation later, doubts about the man began to emerge. None of April's friends or family recognized him based on the description provided, suggesting he was a complete stranger to her, according to witnesses. This encounter occurred around the same time April had texted her boyfriend about an attempted kidnapping, raising further suspicions about the man, since there were very few motorcyclists in town. The man and his unusual motorcycle quickly caught the attention of locals. The motorcycle was described as having a rare blue and white color scheme, making it easy to identify thanks to this detailed description. Police located a motorcycle matching it just 3 days after April's murder, on April 27, 2014. It was found parked in the driveway of a local house. When officers arrived, the motorcycle was still there. The officers approached a man working in the garden, who told them the motorcycle did not belong to him. Instead, it belonged to his 32-year-old friend, James Donald Van Callis, who lived in the neighboring town. About 30 kilometers from Armada, this information was verified. On April 28, officers met with James, the owner of the motorcycle, to question him about his whereabouts on the day April was killed. From the start, James was cooperative and willing to answer all questions. He claimed he had been at a friend's house in Armada during that time, and his friend confirmed the alibi. However, authorities found the alibi unreliable, as the witness was a friend who might have been covering for him. Additionally, there were minor discrepancies in the timeline. When asked about the shoes he wore that day, James provided a pair of white sneakers. However, the tread on the shoes did not match the marks found on the victim's body. Detectives decided to take a closer look at James to eliminate him as a potential suspect. While he had a criminal record, it was not for violent offenses. His convictions included breaking, as well as failing to pay child support, and the robberies occurring in 2005 and 2006. However, upon reviewing James's background, the police uncovered something far more alarming. His father, James Bernard Van Callis, was a registered abuse offender. The elder James Bernard had been convicted of abusing a 13-year-old minor at the time. Both men lived in the same family home. Authorities considered the possibility that James Bernard and James Donald might be involved in criminal activities. However, the investigation primarily focused on the son, as witnesses had identified a middle-aged man matching the witness's description. Searches of their home revealed that James Bernard and James Donald were growing the territory of the prohibited plant. The quantity was so large that they were arrested and charged with distributing the prohibited banned substance. This allowed law enforcement to detain them, ensuring public safety and preventing the suspects from fleeing the state. While the investigation continued, the police thoroughly inspected all the shoes found in the men's house, but none matched the tread marks found on the victim's body. Additionally, numerous DNA tests were conducted on the clothing, but no traces linked to April were discovered. However, forensic experts who examined the motorcycle were confident that James Donald had used strong cleaning agents shortly before it was seized by the police for analysis. They suspected this was an attempt to remove evidence. James Donald was quite successful. As the police no traces were found, the detectives quickly confirmed their theory. When James Donald's girlfriend contacted the police, she reported that on the day of the murder, in April, she came home to find he meticulously cleaning his shoes, motorcycle, and helmet with strong disinfectants. This unusual behavior made her suspicious. The injuries on the victim's head were consistent with marks that could have been caused by a helmet, leading investigators to believe James Donald might have used it during the assault. She also revealed that he had traveled by car that day to a nearby town where the victim lived, supposedly to visit his friend. James Donald's girlfriend described a pair of black and white sneakers that James Donald frequently wore and loved. However, these shoes did not match the ones he handed over to detectives when they questioned him. After that night, she never saw those sneakers again, leading her to believe James Donald had disposed of them. Fearing he couldn't fully clean away the evidence, she further detailed her troubling relationship with James Donald, describing him as extremely abusive and controlling. Recently, she had felt more like his hostage or property than his girlfriend. He tightly controlled every aspect of her life, even forbidding her from leaving the house unless he accompanied her. She suspected him from the start, but feared he would kill her if she contacted the police. Now that James Bernard and James Donald had been arrested, she could finally speak freely. According to James Donald's own admission to his girlfriend, he claimed he was cleaning his belongings because they had been stained with machine oil while fixing his motorbike. However, she remained unconvinced. The police needed to confirm that the sneakers she described matched the ones James Donald commonly wore. They found photos on his social media page showing him wearing sneakers identical to her description. although James Donald had disposed of the pair he wore during the murder. The police located and purchased the same model when they compared the tread pattern to the marks on the victim's body. Forensic experts found an exact match. The investigation revealed that April had been trampled to death with shoes James Donald had purchased about a year before the attack. Further evidence was found on his computer, where investigators uncovered his disturbing interest in much younger girls. Additionally, crucial information came from April's phone using FBI lab analysis. It was discovered that she had a fitness app installed, which monitored her movements, steps, and heart rate, among other data. Shortly after sending a worrying message to her boyfriend, Austin, the data showed she suddenly began running. As if trying to escape from someone, James Donald reportedly approached the girl on his motorcycle and offered her something. Shortly afterward, she sent her boyfriend a message about an attempted kidnapping. Then she ran really fast to escape her pursuer. Minutes later, her fitness app recorded a sudden, chaotic, and extremely fast increase in her movements, lasting 10 to 15 minutes. This appears to have been the moment she fought for her life. Later, the criminal returned to his vehicle with the April's phone. The app recorded a steady speed of about 20 kilometers per hour, which continued until the phone was discarded about a kilometer from the attack site. Surveillance cameras along the biker's route captured footage of the motorcycle and identified the suspect as 32-year-old James Donald. Additionally, geolocation data from his mobile phone confirmed that, at the time of the attack, he was not with a friend, as he claimed, but near the crime scene. By this point, everyone was certain of his involvement in the murder. There was enough evidence to charge him with April's murder and proceed to court. However, a significant challenge remained. The lack of direct evidence. The police were unable to find any DNA linking James Donald to the victim. Of course, against this background, lawyers could effectively refer to indirectly provided evidence. Forensic experts were unable to find traces of the victim's blood on his belongings, equipment, or helmet. James Donald had meticulously cleaned everything and disposed of all incriminating items. It was clear that the man was highly experienced. In this case, the prosecutor's office decided to proceed with the charges despite relying on indirect evidence. These evidences was enough to convince the jury of James Donald's guilt in October 2014. 3 months after the crime, James was formally charged, and the trial was scheduled for early 2016. It was believed that he attacked a teenage girl, April. After she rejected his advances, James Donald had spent considerable time online researching ways to attract much younger girls, particularly minors. But none of the advice seemed to work. Tragically, when April refused him, he reacted violently and attacked her. The defense argued that the prosecution lacked definitive proof of James's guilt and claimed the case was built entirely on circumstantial evidence, although James maintained his innocence. His arguments were unconvincing. As a last resort, his lawyer emphasized that James Donald had no prior record of serious crimes. However, this was not enough to sway the jury. After several hours of deliberation, the jury unanimously found him guilty of attempted kidnapping, abuse, and first-degree murder. James Donald Van Callis was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the sentencing, April's mother spoke extensively. She expressed her satisfaction with the court's decision, relieved that the perpetrator would never be released. She was horrified that her child's life had been taken by an adult man simply because his advances were rejected. His actions and intentions were criminal from the start, but the level of cruelty he displayed was unimaginable. Despite this, James refused to admit his guilt or show any remorse. He continued to claim his innocence. Even after his conviction, he attempted to overturn the court's decision by filing an appeal with his lawyer, but it was unsuccessful. Now, he remains in prison for committing a heinous crime against an innocent young girl, April Millsap, in April's memory. A memorial garden was created near the spot where her life was tragically taken. A small statue of her dog, Penny, stands in the garden to honor the pet who led strangers to the scene of the crime. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case, the case of Lana Clayton. Today, we will discuss a common household medication, eye drops. What a surprise. They have indeed been used as a weapon for murder. Let's begin with the story of Stephen Clayton, a kind-hearted and romantic man who believed in true love. He found great success on his own and was passionate about helping others achieve their goals. Born in South Carolina in 1954, Stephen was a highly motivated individual. By the age of 30, he had established a successful physical therapy business focused on sports injury treatment and rehabilitation. For many years, Stephen lived his dream and achieved remarkable success, earning millions by 1995 and running a large company. After selling his business, he chose to enjoy life and dedicated his free time to teaching and mentoring young entrepreneurs, helping them realize their dreams. Throughout his life, Stephen positively influenced many people, and those he helped felt fortunate to have known him. Stephen was a firm believer in true love and made several attempts to find his soulmate. Despite his past relationships not working out, he remained hopeful of finding the one. His last marriage was to Lana Clayton in 2010. Stephen, who had moved to North Carolina, met Lana online. She was 10 years younger than he was. He quickly became infatuated with her. They got married in November 2013, when Stephen was nearly 60 years old, and Lana, his 7th or 8th wife, after 2 years of marriage. They moved into a luxurious mansion on the shores of Lake Wylie in South Carolina. Designed to resemble George Washington's estate, it was a beautiful, idyllic location surrounded by nature. Stephen had sufficient funds to support this lifestyle even after many years of retirement. Meanwhile, Lana continued to work as a medical professional with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, caring for veterans in various hospitals. Her kindness and compassion deepened Stephen's love for her. She was exactly who he wanted by his side for several years. Stephen's family felt very close to Lana, believing that she and Stephen brought each other happiness. With no apparent signs of trouble in their relationship, little is known about what happened later in Stephen and Lana's marriage. But by 2018, Stephen had passed away. On July 21, around 1 p.m., Lana dashed out of their house into the street, stopping a passing motorcyclist in a panic. She told him her husband needed help and urged him to call 911. The man called emergency services and then saw Lana running to a neighbor's house in search of more help, while the man was speaking with the dispatcher, trying to get help to the scene. He noticed that Lana received a text message on her phone. She appeared visibly angry and did not attempt to hide her emotions. Meanwhile, the neighbor went inside the house to check on Stephen, while Lana stayed outside. It seemed that something traumatic had occurred inside. The ambulance finally arrived, and when they entered the house, they saw that Stephen was lying at the bottom of the main staircase under a white sheet, and sadly, it was too late to save him. The paramedics confirmed that Stephen had died, and everything Lana mentioned about her husband's health, along with his appearance, suggested that his death was accidental. She explained that Stephen had been feeling very dizzy and had been sick for the past few days, unable to get out of bed. That morning, although Stephen still felt unwell, when she checked on him around 11 a.m., he was alive and seemed fine later. Lana decided to go outside and mow the lawn, which took her about 2 hours due to its large size. When she returned to the house, she found Stephen lying at the foot of the stairs. Stephen had not been in good health, and given his age, this could explain his death. Looking back, several years earlier, Stephen had gone to the Bahamas to go diving. He ignored several basic safety rules, which led to him becoming severely ill. He changed from very low pressure to very high pressure too quickly, without allowing his body time to adjust, which is crucial. When diving at different depths, Stephen did not take precautions, which led to long-term complications from decompression sickness. He required several months of rehabilitation and was never able to fully recover, despite all attempts to help him. He continued to experience health issues when the police officers spoke with Lana afterward. They quickly concluded that it was a terrible accident, given Stephen's age and previous health problems. They also considered the possibility of a heart attack. However, not everyone at the scene shared this view. Nick French, one of Stephen's nephews and a police officer from a nearby county, rushed to his uncle's home as soon as he heard the news. He noticed details that others overlooked. For instance, Lana had 2 phones in the house and was a nurse. Why didn't she call 911 herself? Instead, she chose to run into the street to ask a stranger to call for an ambulance and then went to a neighbor's house for help. When people are under stress, they can sometimes lose their ability to think logically, and this can happen even to those who are well trained. Additionally, Stephen's nephew noticed that the stair runner was not secured in any way. It was completely untouched. If someone, especially someone as tall as Stephen, had fallen down the stairs, the runner would have shifted, but it remained in place. There were also several odd aspects of Lana's behavior that caught Nick's attention right away. She never mentioned that. As a trained nurse, she attempted to revive her husband. The medical examiner said they would take Stephen's body and conduct several tests to determine the exact cause of death and reassure his wife, but Lana was not interested in understanding what had happened to her husband. Her primary concern was to get him to the morgue quickly. Everything about the situation seemed suspicious when someone brought up the investigation into the cause of Stephen's death. Lana appeared very uncomfortable. She started discussing how Stephen had a history of using banned substances and expressed her reluctance to perform an autopsy, fearing it would damage his reputation. However, she quickly added that he wasn't a heavy user. He smoked a little weed and maybe tried some other things occasionally. As she spoke, Lana's demeanor grew increasingly suspicious, especially when Nick suggested contacting Stephen's other nephew, Chris Fagan. Lana strongly opposed this idea, claiming she didn't want Chris to see his uncle in such a condition, believing it would be too difficult for him. However, Chris was an adult and deserved to be informed about what had happened. Nick tried 3 times to persuade Lana to tell Chris, but each time she refused. Ultimately, Nick decided that Chris needed to be informed, and so he would call Chris anyway, while an upset Lana sat on the couch speaking with police officers. Nick went upstairs to make a private call. First, he noticed that Stephen's mobile phone was missing, which was unusual since Stephen always carried it with him. He thought the phone should be lying next to Stephen's bed, on the dresser, or on the bed, but it was nowhere to be seen. Another strange thing Nick noticed was the condition of the room. Although Lana had mentioned that Stephen had been sick in bed for several days, he expected to see a typical mess: tissues, cups, and medicine packaging scattered about, along with the smell of illness. Instead, he was confronted with something entirely different. The bed was completely soaked with urine, indicating that Stephen had been left in deplorable conditions. This was alarming to Nick, especially since Lana, a nurse experienced in caring for veterans, should have ensured her husband was looked after, even if she wasn't sleeping in the same room as him. She could have at least changed the sheets. Investigators believe that Lana intentionally discarded Stephen's phone while he was in bed, preventing him from calling for help. They also think she may have taken his phone several days before his death, since his sister was unable to reach him, which was unusual for him. Chris, Stephen's nephew, whom Lana had wanted to avoid contacting, was eventually informed about the situation. He decided to visit her, to see how she was doing, and to discuss matters in person. And upon his arrival, he brought up the topic of the will. As the heir to Stephen estate, Chris wanted to locate the will so he could handle his uncle's affairs. However, Lana claimed that Stephen had not created a will. Chris knew this couldn't be true because he had seen the will before. Furthermore, it was hard to believe that Stephen, who was wealthy, intelligent, and 64 years old with health issues, would not have prepared one. The main surprise came when the Clayton family learned that Lana had destroyed Stephen's will. She had started a small fire and burned a stack of legal documents. Lana believed that by doing this, as Stephen's wife, she would automatically inherit his entire estate under South Carolina law, but her actions went further. 2 weeks after Stephen's passing, during his wake, family and friends noticed that Lana had already collected all of his belongings and was trying to give them away at his funeral. She offered his items to relatives, stating that anything they didn't take would be given to outsiders. This behavior raised eyebrows and didn't match what one would expect from a grieving widow. Stephen's nephews were determined not to let their doubts about Lana be ignored. They discreetly contacted the morgue, requested an autopsy and toxicology tests on behalf of the family. All without informing Lana, the forensic toxicologist and medical examiner conducted tests that revealed the true cause of Stephen's death. They discovered that Stephen Clayton had an extremely high level of a chemical commonly found in some eye drops, particularly those used to treat redness. This chemical is designed to constrict blood vessels in the eyes when applied, but when ingested in large amounts, it can depress the central nervous system, cause rapid heart rate, and even result in death, since this substance is colorless, odorless, and tasteless. It can be consumed unknowingly, making it very dangerous. Even at lower doses, it can cause unpleasant side effects like vomiting and diarrhea, while higher doses can lead to life-threatening situations. With this new information in mind, investigators needed to determine whether Stephen had ingested the eye drops. Therefore, on August 29, 2018, Lana was called in for questioning under the pretext of clarifying some details. At that time, she thought she had avoided suspicion. In reality, the detectives wanted to share their findings and observe her reaction, although Lana was aware that an autopsy had been performed without her knowledge. She was unaware that FBI agents and personnel from the York County Sheriff's Office were in the next room, listening to her. During the interrogation, Lana initially acted like a grieving widow who had no idea what had happened to her husband. However, when the detectives began discussing the eye drops, she quickly realized their significance, and her behavior shifted dramatically. She seemed to know about the substance and started to weave a complicated story about Stephen. She claimed that her husband had discovered that adding a few drops of the medication to his morning coffee could act as a laxative, which he had been doing due to his bowel issues. This was her explanation for why the substance was found in Stephen's body. There were many other products available that could address this issue. Lana herself was a nurse, and the detectives couldn't understand why Stephen had been doing this for some time. However, Lana soon sensed that they doubted her initial account. So she changed her story. She suddenly began to assert that Stephen had abused her for years. She attempted to persuade the detectives that her husband was a terrible and cruel person who had used illegal substances. The detectives quickly recognized that her claims were false, as they had already reviewed the toxicology report. If Stephen had been using banned substances regularly, it would have been evident in the report. They also looked into her accusations of his cruelty and found no evidence to support them. Ultimately, Lana began to realize she was in a precarious situation. The interrogation concluded with her returning home. Unaware that the investigators were closely monitoring her, apparently, she thought a lot while driving home, because when Lana got home, she sat down with the detectives and told them almost everything. Lana disclosed that after enduring years of abuse from her husband, she finally reached a breaking point. She admitted to pouring an entire bottle of eye drops into his water, claiming she did not intend to kill him, but wanted him to suffer. Her goal was to make him ill for a day or two, so he wouldn't bother her, giving her a chance to escape his constant demands. In a shocking twist, Lana also confessed that 2 years prior to Stephen's death, she had called 911. Claiming she accidentally shot him in the back of the head with a crossbow, she explained that she was just loading the crossbow for protection and accidentally shot him while he was sleeping. Surprisingly, the police believed her story of an accident, and Stephen likely supported her claim, thinking his wife would never intentionally harm him. However, on August 29, 2018, Lana confessed that Stephen's death was not an accident and that she had intentionally killed him to stop him from abusing her. The investigators still believed there was more to the story. The circumstances of the crime scene in Stephen's bedroom led detectives to a specific conclusion. It was evident that Lana had been gradually poisoning him over several days to determine how long it would take to kill him. Specifically, while he spent 3 days in bed feeling dizzy, she was experimenting with the right dosage of poison. And on the 3rd day, she succeeded. Additionally, regarding Stephen's missing mobile phone, detectives suspected that Lana had thrown it into Lake Wylie to prevent him from calling for help when he was unable to move in bed. York County Police arrested Lana Clayton after a thorough investigation based on her confession, which took several days to evaluate. During this time, Lana attempted to harm herself by taking pills and turning on the gas in her home. Fortunately, a neighbor checked on her and discovered the situation. She was quickly taken to the hospital and survived. A few days later, she was officially arrested and charged with murder once it became clear that Lana had killed Stephen. His family began to reflect on the past few years of his marriage. Questioning whether Lana had been planning the murder for a long time, they speculated that their move to South Carolina was deliberate. Considering that state law stipulates a spouse inherits everything if their partner dies without a will, they also remembered that Stephen had experienced unexplained health issues intermittently over several months, and even the best doctors could not help him. On January 17, 2020, Lana pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and tampering with food and drugs. She maintains that she did not intend to kill her husband. The prosecutor described the case as one of the worst in York County's history, according to the prosecution. Lana administered eye drops to Stephen over several days at their home on Lake Wylie and ignored him as he was dying, even throwing his phone into the lake to prevent him from calling for help. Authorities suggest her motive was financial, and she even burned a will. Lana's lawyer argued that she had been a victim of lifelong abuse and suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, which developed during her marriage to Stephen after a jury deliberated. Lana was sentenced to 25 years in prison without parole. This was a well-thought-out and successfully executed plan on Lana's part. Stephen's relatives confronted the deception of the evil murderer, whom they believed to be not only a good person, but also their friend. Lana deceived not only Stephen, but also his family and friends.